The air hung heavy with the weight of ancient tales, beckoning all who listened to dim their surroundings, find solace beneath a comforting blanket, and permit the cacophony of the day to dissipate into the quietude of myth. Perhaps the soft whir of a fan might enhance the ambiance, setting the stage for a journey into the heart of divine drama. For anyone who has ever pondered the complexities of a relationship with a partner whose focus seemed perpetually elusive, the predicament of the revered goddess Hera offers a poignant parallel. Her divine spouse, Zeus, the undisputed sovereign of the Olympian pantheon, possessed a gaze that, to put it mildly, had an unfortunate propensity for distraction. Indeed, to describe it merely as wandering might be a significant understatement. His attention did not simply meander, but rather embarked on what could only be termed extended, unannounced excursions. One might easily envision Zeus, enthroned majestically upon his gleaming marble seat, with the very air around him subtly charged by the faint crackle of lightning bolts held loosely in his grasp, casting his omniscient gaze upon the world unfolding beneath. The venerable Hellenes conceived of him as a formidable bearded patriarch, whose eyes possessed the extraordinary ability to perceive every single event transpiring on the terrestrial plane. And what, precisely, did these all-seeing eyes behold? Regrettably for his long-suffering consort, Hera, his vision frequently landed upon a multitude of mortal women who captured his fleeting interest. It is imperative to grasp that within the rich tapestry of ancient Greek narratives, Zeus was far from embodying what contemporary society would consider an exemplary figure. The Greeks recounted these sagas not out of a conviction that Zeus was flawless, but rather as a profound means of deciphering the inexplicable occurrences of their world. Why did tumultuous storms rage across the land? The gods, particularly Zeus, were surely incensed. What force caused a meandering river to abruptly alter its course? Zeus, in all likelihood, was somehow implicated, and why did certain noble lineages proudly assert their descent from divine ancestry? Ah, well, Zeus had certainly been prolific in his earthly endeavors. Our exploration commences at the very genesis of this enduring pattern. The marital union between Zeus and Hera was, to say the least, profoundly intricate. Though they reigned conjointly over the celestial realms, Zeus appeared to have never quite mastered the fundamental concept of togetherness. Hera, consequently, spent a considerable portion of her immortal existence seated upon her resplendent golden throne, perhaps rhythmically tapping her fingers, perpetually consumed by the nagging question of her husband's latest escapade. One can readily picture her celestial morning ritual. Awakening within their opulent cloud palace, she would stretch languidly, perhaps partaking of some ambrosia, the delectable sustenance of the gods, akin to honey yet imbued with far greater mystical properties, for her morning repast. Then, her gaze would sweep across their grand chambers, only to confirm Zeus's familiar absence. Again. A soft sigh would likely escape her lips as she smoothed the elegant folds of her long robes, steeling herself for whatever tidings the swift-footed messenger gods were destined to deliver. Invariably, the news bore a striking resemblance. Zeus had spied yet another mortal woman somewhere on earth, and a powerful, irresistible urge to make her acquaintance had seized him. Yet Zeus, in his divine majesty, could not simply approach a mortal as an ordinary being might. Oh no, such mundane interactions were beneath him. He demanded drama, spectacle, and an air of the extraordinary. He would metamorphose, transforming himself entirely into something altogether different. On occasion, he assumed the form of a magnificent white bull, its eyes imbued with a gentle softness, its fur adorned with delicate blossoms. At other times, he became a majestic swan, gliding with unparalleled grace across tranquil lakes. Once, remarkably, he even manifested as a shower of shimmering golden light. One cannot help but marvel at his boundless creativity, even while harboring profound reservations about his judgment. The compelling truth is that these astonishing transformations were not merely for ostentatious display. Zeus genuinely seemed to harbor the conviction that by approaching these mortal women disguised as an animal or a force of nature, the ensuing complications would somehow be minimized. Inevitably, of course, such an outcome never materialized. The situations consistently escalated in complexity rather than diminishing. Consider Europa, for instance. She was a princess, leading a serene existence by the sea, likely spending her days engaged in the art of weaving or strolling along the sun-drenched shore, collecting smooth, sea-worn pebbles and listening to the rhythmic murmur of the waves. Her life was perfectly unremarkable, utterly normal. Then, one fateful day, a breathtakingly beautiful white bull materialized near her cherished meadow. The bull exuded such an aura of gentleness and amiability that Europa, charmed, decided to approach it, perhaps even daring to clamber upon its broad back. The astute listener can undoubtedly anticipate the unfolding events. The bull, none other than Zeus in his elaborate disguise, abruptly surged forward, hurtling towards the sea, and plunged headlong into its depths. Europa found herself clinging desperately for her very life as they traversed the vast expanse of the Mediterranean. This was, to be sure, a far cry from the tranquil afternoon she had meticulously planned. Or reflect upon the tale of Io, a youthful priestess who, in all probability, dedicated her days to the solemn duties of the temple, meticulously lighting incense and diligently maintaining the sacred, eternal flames. She possessed a structured routine, a clear sense of purpose, and a defined place within the fabric of her community. Then, Zeus's discerning eye fell upon her. Before she could fully comprehend the shift, her entire existence was irrevocably upended. The unwelcome attention of Zeus never, under any circumstances, simplified anyone's life. Perhaps the most perplexing aspect of these divine dalliances was Zeus's apparent genuine astonishment when these encounters inevitably spawned a multitude of problems. He would return to the lofty heights of Mount Olympus, likely anticipating that Hera would either remain oblivious or perhaps simply not care. Yet Hera always perceived the truth. She possessed an uncanny ability to uncover every secret, every transgression. This might have been due to her sacred role as the goddess of marriage and family. These foundational aspects of existence were, quite literally, her specialized domain. Hera's retaliatory measures were typically swift, decisive, and remarkably inventive. She was, regrettably, unable to directly punish Zeus. He was, after all, the indisputable monarch of the gods. However, she possessed the power to render the lives of the mortal women involved exceedingly arduous. She would transform them into animals, curse them to wander the earth aimlessly, or dispatch terrifying monsters to relentlessly pursue them. While this might appear inherently unfair, the concept of fairness was not in essence the central tenet of these ancient narratives. The Hellenic storytellers who wove these intricate tales were not endeavoring to craft a moralistic guide for virtuous conduct. Rather, they sought to illuminate and explain the fundamental nature of the world as they perceived it. Why did such a diverse array of peoples inhabit so many distinct lands? Well, Zeus had journeyed far and wide. Why did some earthly rulers lay claim to divine lineage? Zeus had been exceedingly active. Why did storms rage and earthquakes rend the earth? The gods, it seemed, were embroiled in rather tumultuous domestic disputes. One can almost visualize Zeus, following each of these audacious adventures, settling back onto his magnificent throne with a contented sigh, perhaps adjusting the folds of his regal robes and smoothing his majestic beard. He would undoubtedly persuade himself that this time, the outcome would be entirely different. This time, Hera would surely remain unaware. This time, no one would suffer harm. Inevitably, of course, his self-deception proved utterly unfounded. There was always another celestial tempest, another furious marital confrontation, another mortal woman whose life was irrevocably shattered because the king of the gods simply could not remain within the confines of his divine home. And through it all, Hera waited. She steadfastly managed the intricate affairs of Mount Olympus. She ensured the smooth operation of the divine household. And with a formidable resolve, she meticulously plotted her subsequent move. For if there was one immutable truth regarding Zeus, it was the absolute certainty that there would always be a next time. The profound influence these narratives exerted on the ancient Greeks' perceptions of power and accountability is truly fascinating. Zeus wielded unparalleled authority over the entire cosmos, yet he exercised it with an alarming thoughtlessness. He possessed the capacity to accomplish anything he desired, yet he seldom, if ever, paused to consider whether he ought to. And the far-reaching repercussions of his actions radiated outwards, impacting not merely himself and Hera, but countless innocent individuals who merely happened to capture his fleeting attention. However, the true depth of these consequences will be explored with greater scrutiny as we journey further into the labyrinthine corridors of these ancient sagas. For the present moment, one is invited to simply envision Zeus upon his exalted throne, his all-seeing eyes surveying the vast expanse of the world below, and to ponder with a sense of mounting anticipation what grand or perhaps mischievous scheme he might be orchestrating next. Europa awoke on that particular morning precisely as she had on every preceding morning for the entirety of her 16 years. She stretched luxuriously within her bed, relishing the cool, smooth sensation of the linen sheets against her skin, and listened intently to the gentle awakening sounds of her father's grand palace stirring to life. One can easily picture her established morning routine. She would gracefully slip from her bed, her bare feet meeting the cool, polished marble floor, and softly pad across the chamber to the expansive window. There, she would observe the white sails of distant ships catching the nascent light of dawn and inhale the invigorating aroma of salt air mingling with the comforting scent of freshly baked bread wafting upwards from the bustling town below. Europa, by birthright, was a princess. Her days were not spent confined within lofty towers, nor did she languish in passive anticipation of a heroic rescue. Instead, her life was structured around significant responsibilities. She actively assisted in the meticulous management of the royal household, diligently supervised the retinue of servants, and assiduously acquired the essential skills she would undoubtedly require when she eventually entered into marriage and assumed the formidable task of overseeing a palace of her own. Yet this particular morning carried an indefinable quality, a subtle difference. Perhaps it was the unique way the early light diffused across her private chambers, or the seemingly heightened cheerfulness in the melodic chorus of birds just beyond her window. Europa found herself irresistibly drawn to the compelling notion of spending the entire day immersed in the embrace of the outdoors. She meticulously selected a soft, cerulean blue dress, whose hue perfectly mirrored the depths of her own eyes, and painstakingly braided her long, lustrous hair, artfully weaving vibrant ribbons through its strands. Subsequently, she gathered a select group of her closest companions, young women hailing from esteemed noble families who served as her trusted attendants. Their collective decision led them towards a verdant meadow, a place renowned for its abundant wildflowers and its perpetually soft, emerald-green grasses. This idyllic meadow lay approximately a mile's distance from the palace, and the journey there was both pleasant and unhurried. Europa and her companions engaged in light-hearted conversation about myriad trivial matters, an impending wedding that was meticulously being planned, a novel style of bracelet that had recently surged in popularity, and the speculative question of whether the capricious weather would hold steadfast for the eagerly anticipated harvest festival. These were the utterly normal exchanges one would expect from normal young women on a perfectly normal day. Upon their arrival at the meadow, Europa felt her spirits ascend even further, buoyed by the sheer beauty of the surroundings. The expansive space was a breathtaking spectacle, overflowing with a kaleidoscopic array of flowers in every conceivable color. Brilliant red poppies swayed gracefully in the gentle, caressing breeze, while pristine white daisies and cheerful yellow buttercups collectively formed a luxuriant carpet of vibrant hues. The very air was imbued with the sweet, intoxicating fragrance of blooming herbs, subtly underscored by the distant, briny scent of the ever-present sea. Europa and her friends dispersed across the sprawling meadow, their nimble fingers busily gathering an assortment of blossoms to meticulously weave into intricate garlands. Their laughter echoed lightly through the air as they called out to one another, eagerly pointing out particularly exquisite blooms, or playfully chasing the delicate butterflies that danced with ethereal grace among the petals. It was precisely the kind of tranquil, joyous moment that imprints itself indelibly upon one's memory, to be cherished for years to come. It was in this idyllic setting that Europa's gaze first fell upon the bull. It stood poised at the very edge of the meadow, its magnificent form partially obscured by a dense grove of ancient olive trees. Initially, she surmised it might simply belong to one of the local, industrious farmers. But as her gaze sharpened and she observed it with greater scrutiny, a profound realization dawned upon her. This was unequivocally no ordinary farm animal. The bull was of an unblemished, pure white, a hue more dazzling than freshly fallen snow or the pristine foam of the sea. Its lustrous coat seemed to shimmer and pulsate with an inner light under the warm caress of the sunlight, and its eyes, strikingly, possessed an unusual depth of gentleness and an undeniable, keen intelligence. Princess Europa's formative years had been nurtured amidst a lively menagerie, a constant companion to the diverse creatures inhabiting her father's opulent palace. Expansive equestrian facilities housed a magnificent array of horses, while a multitude of dogs and cats roamed freely through the grand corridors, their presence a familiar comfort. Consequently, she possessed an innate ability to decipher the nuanced lexicon of creaturely gestures, instinctively discerning whether an animal was amicable or posed a potential threat. This particular bovine, notwithstanding its formidable stature, exuded an aura of profound tranquility. She observed intently as it advanced a few paces into the verdant meadow, executing each movement with an astonishing fluidity unexpected from such a colossal beast. Its cloven hooves descended with a barely perceptible whisper upon the yielding grass, creating an illusion that it appeared to glide effortlessly rather than merely ambulate. Her companions, observing from a slight remove, murmured in hesitant apprehension, debating the prudence of approaching such a magnificent animal. Yet Europa herself experienced an irresistible pull towards the creature. Its serene demeanor possessed a peculiar quality, reminiscent of the docile cervids that occasionally graced the palace gardens with their presence. With a burgeoning sense of trust, she advanced a few steps, extending her hand in an overture of camaraderie. The bull reciprocated by drawing nearer, its majestic head inclined in a gesture akin to reverence. Europa, emboldened, reached out and made contact with its neck, astonished by the unexpected plushness and comforting warmth of its coat. The bull then emitted a deep, resonant vibration, a sound not quite a bellow, but rather evoking the gentle thrum of a feline's contented rumble, an improbable sound from such a creature. Heartened by this unequivocal display of amity, Europa began to caress the powerful musculature of the bull's neck and shoulders. Her companions, though observing with palpable trepidation from their vantage point, noted that Europa herself experienced a profound sense of security in the creature's presence. She then observed the bull gracefully lowering itself onto its forelegs, a clear, silent invitation to climb onto its back. Having been accustomed to equestrian pursuits since childhood, she recognized the striking resemblance to mounting a horse. The bull exuded such an unwavering placidity and docility that the prospect presented no discernible threat. Europa carefully arranged her flowing vestments and, with a measure of composure, ascended its broad, warm back. Its fur was so incredibly soft that it afforded a sensation akin to reposing upon a celestial cushion. The bull held its position with unwavering steadiness, affording her ample opportunity to settle and find her equilibrium. Then, with a deliberate, unhurried motion, it rose to its full height. For a fleeting moment, a tableau of absolute perfection unfolded. Europa perched with effortless elegance upon the bull's back, a profound sensation enveloping her, as if she had become an integral figure within a timeless myth or venerable epic. The golden rays of the sun bestowed a comforting warmth upon her countenance. Fragrant blossoms diffused a delicate sweetness through the air, and her companions watched, their visages illuminated by a blend of awe and pure joy. However, this idyllic interlude was abruptly interrupted as the bull commenced its progression. Initially, it was merely a leisurely amble towards the periphery of the meadow. Europa harbored no immediate apprehension, presuming the bovine intended to revert to its point of origin, and that she could effortlessly dismount once they reached the sheltering embrace of the trees. However, the formidable beast bypassed the sylvan boundary, exhibiting no inclination to halt. Instead, it accelerated its pace, moving with increasing velocity towards the shimmering expanse of the sea. Europa endeavored to cry out to her friends, but their distant figures were already beyond the reach of assistance. She attempted to slide off the bull's back, yet found herself inexplicably immobilized. It was not as if she were physically restrained or affixed, but rather she experienced an irresistible intrinsic compulsion to remain precisely where she was. The bull's leisurely gait transformed into a brisk trot, then a spirited canter, culminating in a thunderous full gallop. Europa clung desperately, her pulse hammering in her ears as they hurtled towards the coastal expanse. The crescendo of the ocean's roar intensified with each passing moment, and a dawning awareness settled upon her that an extraordinary and inexplicable phenomenon was unfolding. Upon reaching the sandy stretch of the beach, Europa fully anticipated the bull's cessation of movement. Instead, to her utter astonishment, it plunged unhesitatingly into the encroaching surf. The water, unexpectedly temperate, enveloped them, and defying the laws of physics, the bull appeared to buoy effortlessly upon the aqueous expanse, akin to a vessel propelled by unseen forces and invisible sails. Glancing back, Europa could discern her friends standing forlornly on the shoreline, shouting her appellation and gesticulating wildly, but their frantic cries diminished into an increasingly distant murmur as the extraordinary bovine continued to transport her further into the vast ocean. A profound understanding now dawned upon Europa. She was an unwitting participant in an event far grander than a mere pastoral outing. The bull navigated the waters with an undeniable sense of direction and resolve, charting a course towards the ethereal boundary where the celestial dome kissed the oceanic expanse. Europa clung on, her mind racing as she endeavored to rationalize the unfolding surrealism. Her thoughts drifted to the narratives recounted by her venerable grandmother, particularly the ancient accounts of Olympian deities possessing the extraordinary ability to assume myriad guises at will. It was then that a compelling suspicion began to take root within her mind. This magnificent creature was unequivocally no common bovine. As they traversed the azure expanse of the Mediterranean Sea, Europa discovered within herself an unexpected tranquility. Although beset by both trepidation and bewilderment, she was simultaneously imbued with an unusual, yet potent, sense of eager expectation. Whatever grand design was unfolding, it was unquestionably a component of a momentous destiny, poised to irrevocably alter the trajectory of her existence. The majestic bull persisted in its aquatic journey as the solar orb arced gracefully through the heavens, and Europa perceived their trajectory was set towards a remote insular landmass. Though unseen by her mortal eyes, an intrinsic certainty affirmed its presence, poised in expectant readiness, and she knew, with an unwavering conviction, that upon their arrival, all mysteries would be unveiled. Io had always derived profound contentment from her sacred duties within the temple's venerable confines. Each morning, with unfailing punctuality, she would present herself at the hallowed sanctuary precisely as the dawn's first blush painted the eastern sky, her modest sandals producing a gentle rhythmic cadence upon the cool marble steps. Her initial task involved unbolting the formidable ancient timber portals, a moment followed by a deep inhalation of the evocative melange of consecrated incense and rich olive oil that permeated the hallowed space. Thus, she would commence the serene regimen that had meticulously structured the rhythm of her existence for the preceding 3 years. The venerable temple of Hera was seldom thronged with bustling activity. Only a handful of devout adherents might occasionally grace its threshold throughout the day, depositing modest votive tributes of fruit or freshly gathered flowers. Consequently, predominantly, Io attended to her duties in solitary devotion. Her daily regimen included meticulously cleansing the polished flagstones, burnishing the gleaming bronze accoutrements, and nurturing the perpetual, consecrated flame that flickered ceaselessly upon the revered altars. It was a tranquil occupation, one that graciously allowed for introspective contemplation, while her hands remained diligently engaged in the repetitive, comforting tasks. Io held a special reverence for the hushed sanctity of the pre-dawn hours, when the temple was enveloped in an absolute stillness. With a quiet devotion, she would individually ignite the oil lamps, watching their gentle incandescence gradually dispelling the lingering gloom from the hallowed space. Following this, she would delicately position newly gathered blossoms around the imposing statue of Hera, where the goddess's sculpted visage, rendered in pristine marble, bore an expression of profound serenity and vigilant awareness. The meticulously painted eyes of the effigy appeared, to Io, to track her movements around the chamber, yet she perceived this phenomenon as reassuring rather than disquieting. On this particular morning, as Io meticulously burnished the lustrous silver offering bowls, she detected the distinct sound of ascending footsteps upon the temple stairs. This was an anomaly, as visitors typically refrained from gracing the temple at such an unseasonably early hour. Her gaze lifted to behold a male figure framed within the threshold, starkly silhouetted against the nascent morning light. He was of imposing height and impeccably attired, his features distinguished by a meticulously sculpted beard and a gaze that appeared to radiate an intrinsic, ethereal luminescence. There was an indefinable quality about his presence that instilled within Io a subtle yet palpable unease, though she found herself unable to articulate the precise reason. He regarded her with an unnerving intensity that sent a wave of warmth to her cheeks. A resonant "good morning" emanated from him, his voice possessing a profound depth and comforting warmth. "I was hoping to present a votive offering to the revered goddess." Io inclined her head in acknowledgement and indicated with a sweep of her hand towards the consecrated space. Of course, the sacrificial vessels are readily available there, and freshly prepared incense awaits if you desire to burn some. However, the enigmatic stranger made no discernible movement towards the sacred altar. Instead, he advanced further into Io's personal space, scrutinizing her features with those disconcertingly luminous eyes. "You demonstrate an exceptional devotion to your sacred duties," he remarked, his gaze unwavering. "I have, in fact, been observing your diligence." The revelation sent a distinct shiver of unease traversing Io's spine. She had been entirely oblivious to any such surveillance, and the notion that she had been watched, unseen, profoundly disquieted her. "I merely strive to fulfill my obligations to the divine patroness with utmost diligence," she responded quietly, retreating a subtle, almost imperceptible step. The stranger's lips curved into a smile, a gesture that paradoxically amplified Io's burgeoning apprehension. "I'm sure Hera undoubtedly values your unwavering piety," he intoned smoothly. "But I wonder if you might be inclined to extend your service to another deity, or perhaps an individual of significant standing as well." Io's grip on the delicate silver bowl tightened almost imperceptibly. "I'm sorry," she replied, her voice firm despite her unease. "But I'm bound by solemn oath to the exclusive service of Hera. Should your intention be to present an offering, I am prepared to assist you. Failing that, my duties within this sacred precinct demand my immediate attention." The enigmatic figure then emitted a peal of laughter, resonant and profound, akin to the distant rumble of an approaching storm. "Oh, my dear girl," he declared, his voice imbued with an undeniable authority, "I think you gravely misapprehend the identity of your interlocutor." And then, prior to Io formulating any reply, the man commenced a profound metamorphosis. His corporeal essence expanded, simultaneously radiating an intensified, ethereal luminosity. In a sudden, shocking epiphany, Io realized she was in the very presence of Zeus himself, the sovereign ruler of the entire Olympian pantheon. The staggering realization struck her with the force of a tangible impact, causing her to involuntarily release her grip on the silver offering bowl. It rebounded with a sharp, resonant clang against the polished marble floor. Zeus's countenance broadened into another smile, clearly gratified by her dawning comprehension. "Now, do you grasp the full import of this encounter?" he inquired, his voice resonating with divine authority. "I am not demanding your renunciation of Hera. I am merely proposing a slight broadening of your perspectives." Io's thoughts whirled in a frantic maelstrom. She was intimately familiar with the notorious chronicles of Zeus's amorous escapades, and she knew full well that such liaisons seldom culminated in a favorable outcome for the mortal women entangled. Yet how could one conceivably spurn the overtures of the Olympian sovereign? And an insidious, undeniable facet of her being found itself inexplicably flattered by his singular attention, a feeling she desperately attempted to suppress. I find myself utterly speechless," she faltered, her voice barely a whisper. A simple yet potent command issued from Zeus: "Assent." He continued, "The path ahead would prove considerably less arduous were you to acquiesce." And so, overwhelmed by both terror and disorientation, and because the notion of denying a divine imperative appeared utterly insurmountable, Io offered a reluctant, yet compliant nod. Zeus's smile expanded, revealing a triumphant glint, and he extended a hand to caress her cheek. His touch was remarkably warm, bordering on incandescent, and where he made contact, Io experienced an inexplicable, prickling sensation. For the ensuing weeks, Io's existence was plunged into a tumultuous maelstrom of clandestine rendezvous and illicit stolen moments. Zeus would materialize within the temple precincts at unforeseen intervals, consistently contriving opportunities for solitary communion with her. He bestowed upon her an array of lavish gifts, ornaments of such brilliance they seemed to capture the very effulgence of distant constellations, blossoms imbued with an eternal freshness, immune to decay, and nectarous wine, whose flavor evoked the very essence of liquefied sunlight. Yet even as Io found herself undeniably drawn into this strange, new divine sphere, she remained haunted by an insistent premonition of impending misfortune. She grappled with profound insomnia, and when slumber finally claimed her, she was tormented by vivid prophetic nightmares depicting wrathful goddesses and dire retributions. Her once serene disposition gave way to a heightened state of nervous reactivity, causing her to start at mere shadows and experience an insidious paranoia when left in solitude. Her burgeoning anxieties, it transpired, were profoundly justified. One crisp morning, whilst engaged in the customary illumination of the temple lamps, she perceived an unmistakable presence directly behind her. She revolved to behold Hera herself, positioned majestically within the threshold, her divine manifestation simultaneously awe-inspiring in its terror and sublime in its beauty. The goddess's gaze was imbued with the frigid intensity of a boreal gale, and her utterance, when it finally broke the silence, resonated with the chilling precision of fracturing ice. "And so," Hera declared, her voice laced with an icy disdain, "this is Zeus's latest fleeting diversion." Io, in a sudden collapse, plummeted to her knees, her entire frame convulsing with terror. "What, my esteemed lady, I assure you, I never intended—" "Oh, I am quite certain you didn't," Hera interjected, her tone dripping with sarcasm, cutting off Io's desperate plea. "You young women, it seems, never truly intend anything, do you? You simply, by sheer accident, capture my husband's wandering eye. You merely happen to be conveniently available when he chooses to stray from his marital vows." Io struggled to articulate, to offer an explanation, to beg for forgiveness. But the power of speech eluded her. She remained immobilized, a quivering figure on the ground, as Hera began to circle her with the deliberate, menacing grace of a predator. "I could, of course, extinguish your life," Hera continued, her voice unnervingly conversational. "It would be an effortless act, a swift bolt of lightning perhaps, or a convenient tremor of the earth. But such a demise would be far too simplistic, too easily forgotten. And besides, Zeus would merely seek out another to fill your vacant place." Hera halted directly before Io, a smile playing on her lips. Yet it was a chilling, malevolent expression devoid of any warmth. "No, I believe a more imaginative punishment is warranted, something that will serve as a perpetual daily reminder of the exorbitant cost of attracting my husband's illicit affections." She raised her hand, and Io felt an identical searing sensation to the one that had coursed through her when Zeus had first touched her cheek. This time, however, the intense heat propagated throughout her entire being, and she apprehended with mounting horror that her very form was undergoing a profound alteration. Her arms elongated, gaining an unnatural strength. Her delicate fingers merged, solidifying into hard, dark hooves. Her face distended, her nose extending into a bovine snout, and her human voice transmuted into a profound, sorrowful lowing. Within a mere handful of moments, where Io, the priestess, had knelt in supplication, there now stood only a pristine white cow, its large eyes reflecting a hauntingly human sadness. Yet the most agonizing aspect was not the profound physical metamorphosis. The true torment resided in the fact that Io's human intellect remained perfectly preserved. She retained the capacity to think, to feel, to recall every memory. But she was utterly incapable of speaking or moving as a human being. She was a conscious mind imprisoned within an animal's body, acutely aware of her surroundings, but tragically unable to communicate her plight to anyone. Hera meticulously surveyed her finished work, a profound satisfaction etched upon her features. "There," she pronounced, a cruel triumph in her voice. "Now you possess an appearance befitting one who has sullied herself by cavorting in the dirt with my husband. But my intentions for you are not yet concluded." She emitted a sharp whistle, and into the sacred confines of the temple strode the most peculiar creature Io had ever witnessed. It was unequivocally a man, yet instead of the customary 2 eyes, he possessed a multitude of them, adorning his head, his arms, his very chest. Some remained perpetually open, vigilantly observing, while others intermittently blinked or closed. He moved with an unsettling, fluid grace that was simultaneously captivating and deeply disquieting. "This individual is Argus," Hera elucidated, her voice carrying an air of finality. "He shall be your constant companion. He will observe your every action, every moment of every day, and he will ensure that you do not again entangle yourself in any further improprieties with my husband." And thus commenced the most protracted, solitary chapter of Io's existence. Argus shadowed her incessantly, his numerous eyes meticulously tracking her every movement. She found it impossible to partake of food without his unwavering scrutiny, to seek slumber without him standing sentinel, or even to quench her thirst without feeling the pervasive weight of his gaze upon her. Days imperceptibly bled into weeks, and weeks into arduous months. Io journeyed from one locale to another, always with Argus trailing just a few paces behind. She adapted to foraging for sustenance and locating shelter as a cow, yet her thoughts and perceptions remained intrinsically human. She vividly recalled her former life, her sacred duties at the temple, her cherished friends, and her beloved family, but she was utterly cut off from them, powerless to articulate the dreadful transformation that had befallen her. The most harrowing moments arose when she encountered other human beings. They would invariably spot her, a peculiar white cow accompanied by the strange, many-eyed man, and they would whisper amongst themselves, their hushed tones speaking of dark curses and divine retribution. Occasionally, boisterous children would hurl stones at her, or irate farmers would chase her away from their cultivated fields. She yearned desperately to convey her innocence, to explain that none of this was of her own volition. But all she could produce were the mournful, guttural sounds characteristic of a cow. And through every trial, Argus maintained his ceaseless vigil. His countless eyes never appeared to weary, never seemed to close in unison. Even when some of his ocular organs briefly dozed, others remained acutely alert, diligently following Io's every subtle shift. She gradually began to comprehend that this was now her immutable destiny, this interminable wandering, this relentless surveillance, this profound and agonizing isolation. Yet sometimes late in the night, when the majority of Argus's eyes were finally closed in slumber, Io would lift her gaze to the distant stars and vividly recall the time when she had been unequivocally human. She would conjure the fragrant aroma of incense and the cool, smooth sensation of marble beneath her feet, and she would ponder, with a pang of deep sorrow, if anyone else in the vast world still harbored memories of her. The relentless journey persisted, day after day, traversing rugged mountains and verdant valleys, winding through dense forests and expansive fields. Io's hooves became hardened and severely worn, and her once pristine white coat grew dusty and matted from the ceaseless travel. Yet she continued to move forward, for that was the singular action left to her. She walked and walked, with Argus perpetually trailing behind her, and she often wondered if this arduous, unending trek would ever reach its conclusion. King Acrisius had always been characterized as a meticulously careful individual, the sort of person who would conscientiously count his monetary holdings twice over and meticulously verify the security of the locks on his dwelling before retiring for the night. However, following his fateful visit to the renowned oracle at Delphi, this inherent carefulness had transmuted into something far more intense, bordering on an obsessive paranoia. The oracle had imparted a prophecy that had chilled his very essence. His beloved daughter, Danae, was destined to bear a son, and that son would, in due course, be the instrument of his demise. It is crucial to grasp that oracles in the venerable tradition of ancient Greece were not to be conflated with the frivolous fortune-tellers one might encounter at a common carnival. When an oracle delivered its pronouncements, the populace listened with utmost gravity and conviction. These profound prophecies possessed an uncanny tendency to manifest as reality, regardless of the most strenuous efforts to avert them. Nevertheless, Acrisius was a man of formidable stubbornness, and he harbored an unwavering belief that, if only he exercised sufficient cunning, he could outmaneuver the very fabric of fate itself. His daughter, Danae, a young woman of 16 years, possessed remarkable beauty and keen intellect. Distinguished by her long, flowing auburn hair and eyes the captivating color of autumnal foliage. She had been nurtured within the royal palace, much like other princesses of her station, diligently acquiring the skills of weaving, singing, and the intricate management of a noble household. She demonstrated an inherent kindness towards the palace servants, a generous spirit towards the less fortunate, and had never, in her young life, caused her father a moment of vexation. Any monarch of sound judgment would have undoubtedly taken immense pride in possessing such an exemplary daughter, but Acrisius, consumed by his fear, was no longer thinking with the rationality of a king. His mind was dominated by the terrifying prospect of dying by the hand of his own grandson. And so, instead of seeking a suitable marital match for Danae, and resignedly accepting whatever destiny might unfold, he made the drastic decision to ensure she would never be afforded the opportunity to bear children at all. The towering edifice he commissioned for her incarceration was a testament to his meticulous thoroughness. It was a structure of impressive height and circular design, constructed entirely from polished bronze that gleamed with a mirror-like intensity under the sun's rays. The walls were impeccably smooth and utterly impossible to ascend, devoid of any handholds or decorative elements that might offer even the slightest purchase. There were no conventional windows, only a few diminutive apertures situated near the apex, which admitted a modicum of light and air, but were far too narrow for even a small child to navigate. The sole entrance was located at ground level, and Acrisius had it fortified with 3 distinct and formidable locks. He personally retained all the corresponding keys, carrying them perpetually on a chain suspended around his neck. Within the tower's confines, he had furnished a solitary chamber with every conceivable amenity Danae might require: a luxuriously comfortable bed, a traditional loom for her weaving endeavors, shelves laden with books, and a selection of musical instruments. It was undeniably a prison of exquisite beauty, yet it remained unequivocally a prison. Danae naturally had pleaded with her father, her voice filled with desperate entreaty. She had wept profusely, engaged in fervent arguments, and attempted to appeal to his reason. She had solemnly vowed never to marry, never to bear children, never to undertake any action that might precipitate his prophesied demise. But Acrisius had irrevocably made up his mind, and he remained impervious to her heartfelt supplications. "Handitium, this course of action is ultimately for your own welfare," he had sternly informed her, as he guided her up the winding staircase on that fateful inaugural day. and for the continued prosperity and safety of our kingdom. This is the only viable path to ensure the security of everyone. Danae had longed to retort that she, in her isolated confinement, devoid of any companionship save for the silent servants who delivered her meals, was precisely the one whose safety was most compromised. However, she recognized the unyielding resolve in her father's demeanor, and her inherent pride prevented her from further begging. The initial few months proved to be the most arduous. Danae would spend countless hours positioned by the small, high openings in the wall, gazing wistfully at the vibrant world from which she was now irrevocably severed. She could discern the bustling marketplace where people engaged in the lively exchange of goods, the busy harbor where ships embarked and returned, and the fertile fields where diligent farmers toiled over their crops. She could faintly hear the myriad sounds of life, the joyous laughter of children, the resonant barking of dogs, the melodic calls of merchants hawking their wares. But she was utterly incapable of participating in any of it. She conscientiously endeavored to keep herself occupied. She meticulously wove intricate tapestries, devoured every single book within the tower's collection, not once, but twice, and diligently practiced her musical instruments until she could effortlessly perform complex melodies from memory. Yet the days stretched interminably, each one indistinguishable from the last. She began to grasp, with a profound sense of empathy, why caged birds sometimes ceased their joyful singing. The servants entrusted with delivering her meals were invariably kind in their demeanor, yet maintained a palpable distance. They had been explicitly commanded by the king not to engage in any discourse with her regarding events in the external world, and their fear of royal displeasure was too great to permit disobedience. They would present her with her meals and fresh garments, attend to the cleanliness of her chamber, and then depart swiftly, offering little more than a perfunctory, "Good morning, princess. Is there anything further you require?" Danae began to experience a profound sensation of existential fading, as if her very being were gradually disappearing. When one is unable to meaningfully interact with the lives of others, when one is incapable of effecting any discernible change in the world, does one truly retain a tangible existence? She resorted to speaking aloud to herself, simply to hear the sound of a human voice, and occasionally she would stand before her burnished bronze mirror, meticulously rehearsing conversations she knew she would never have with individuals she would never meet. But with the slow passage of time, she gradually forged a structured routine that provided a measure of solace and helped her to cope with her confinement. She would rise early and engage in physical exercise, performing the elegant dances she had learned in her childhood to maintain her bodily strength and grace. Following this, she would partake of her breakfast and dedicate the entire morning to the intricate art of weaving. The afternoons were reserved for engrossing herself in books or practicing her musical compositions. Her evenings were devoted to the poignant ritual of watching the sun descend below the horizon through the small openings in the wall, her thoughts drifting to the expansive world that lay beyond the unyielding bronze of her prison. After approximately a full year had elapsed, an unusual phenomenon commenced its unfolding. Danae began to perceive subtle alterations in the illumination of her chamber. It had perpetually been subdued, a mere filtration through the slender apertures carved into the formidable bronze walls. Yet now, inexplicably, it presented a brighter aspect. Initially, she attributed this shift to her vision gradually acclimating to the ceaseless crepuscular gloom. However, she soon discerned that the luminosity was, in fact, intensifying. This transformation became most strikingly perceptible in the late afternoon, as the sun dipped low in the celestial expanse. Rather than the customary pallid glow, Danae's confined space would become suffused with a rich golden light that seemed to emanate from every conceivable direction simultaneously. It was a spectacle of profound beauty, yet utterly perplexing, and she found herself utterly unable to ascertain its mysterious origin. This radiant golden light became a recurrent daily occurrence for several ensuing weeks, manifesting invariably at the identical hour and consistently augmenting its brilliance with each appearance. Danae, in her profound isolation, began to eagerly anticipate its arrival. It imparted upon her a peculiar sense of diminished solitude, as though she were being visited by a benign, ethereal presence, even as her rational mind acknowledged the absolute impossibility of such an occurrence within her sealed prison. Then, upon one memorable day, as she was diligently engaged at her loom, the incandescent golden light commenced an intricate ballet of swirling and dancing around her form. It moved with the fluidity of liquid sunshine, flowing gracefully through the air in elaborate patterns that bore an uncanny resemblance to some ancient, enigmatic script. Danae watched, utterly mesmerized, as the light appeared to manifest a distinct sentience, spinning about her in increasingly swift and vibrant gyrations. And then, in a truly astonishing pronouncement, the light itself began to articulate words. "Danae," it intoned, its voice resonating with a mellifluous quality akin to warm honey. "Beautiful Danae, sequestered from the vastness of the world." Danae nearly toppled from her seat in sheer shock. She frantically scanned the confines of the room, desperately seeking the source of the disembodied voice. But there was no one present. Only the luminous golden light which persisted in its vibrant swirling, as if it were a living, breathing entity. "Who are you?" she managed to whisper, her voice barely audible. "I believe you already possess the knowledge," the ethereal light calmly rejoined. "I am the omnipresent one, who perceives all and who journeys wherever my divine will dictates. Walls of bronze cannot impede my passage, and the most intricate human locks are utterly incapable of barring my way." Danae's heart began to palpitate with an accelerated rhythm. She had been raised on mythological narratives concerning the gods, their formidable power, and their frequent propensity to involve themselves in the complex tapestry of human affairs. Yet she had never once conceived that one of these celestial beings might actually grace her with a personal visitation. "Zeus," she breathed, the name escaping her lips like a prayer. The light pulsed with heightened brilliance, and she could distinctly feel a pervasive warmth radiating throughout her entire being. "Your father presumes he is more sagacious than the immutable decrees of destiny," Zeus declared. "He firmly believes that fortifications of bronze and unyielding locks can alter what is irrevocably meant to be. But he has foolishly forgotten that nothing earthly can contain the boundless light of the sun, and absolutely nothing can thwart the determined will of a God who has made up his mind." Over the subsequent weeks, Zeus continued his daily apparitions to Danae. He would manifest as a brilliant golden light, enveloping her desolate prison with an abundance of warmth and ethereal beauty. He regaled her with compelling narratives of the expansive world beyond her confining tower, sang her enchanting melodies that no mortal ear had ever before heard, and gradually Danae began to feel a profound sense of renewed vitality rekindled within her. She understood intellectually that she ought to be gripped by fear. She had absorbed the cautionary tales concerning Zeus's numerous other romantic entanglements, knowing full well that they typically culminated in calamitous outcomes for the mortal women involved. But her pervasive loneliness, her profound desperation for genuine companionship, compelled her to welcome his solicitous attention. For the first time in well over a year, she possessed someone with whom to converse, someone who genuinely appeared to comprehend her dire predicament. And Zeus, for his part, seemed to harbor a truly genuine affection for her. His visits transcended mere romantic overtures. He dedicated time to truly know her, delving into her thoughts, her deepest dreams, and her most secret fears. He greatly admired her inherent fortitude, her remarkable ability to endure prolonged isolation without succumbing to bitterness or cruelty. Months elapsed, and Danae began to discern unmistakable transformations within herself. Her physique was gradually burgeoning, her appetite experienced a marked increase, and she felt an unfamiliar kind of unrelenting fatigue that even extensive sleep could not alleviate. She was carrying a child, the very outcome her father had meticulously constructed the tower to prevent. Yet, instead of being consumed by terror, Danae experienced a strange, profound elation. She was destined to have a baby, someone to cherish and care for. She would no longer be utterly alone, and perhaps, just perhaps, this precious infant would serve as the catalyst for her liberation. Zeus persisted in his visits throughout her entire pregnancy, thoughtfully bringing her special, nutritious provisions and ensuring her well-being remained robust. He imparted to her that their progeny would be truly extraordinary, destined for unparalleled greatness. He would become a hero, Zeus proclaimed, an individual who would accomplish illustrious achievements and whose name would be etched into the annals of history for countless generations. When the infant was finally ushered into the world, Danae lovingly named him Perseus. He was a beautiful child with bright, inquisitive eyes and robust cries, and she instantly felt an unbounded affection for him. She would cherish him for hours, softly singing the very lullabies her own mother had sung to her, and marveling at his tiny, perfect fingers and toes. However, she knew with chilling certainty that their precarious time within the tower was severely limited. Acrisius would inevitably learn about the baby, and upon that imminent revelation, he would likely endeavor to destroy them both. The oracle's dire prophecy was already beginning its fulfillment, and her father would be consumed by a desperate urgency to avert its completion. Danae gazed down at her sleeping son and pondered deeply what the future would hold for them both. The bronze tower had utterly failed to keep Zeus out, just as it had failed to keep fate at bay. Soon, she knew, they would have to confront whatever fortuitous circumstances or grave perils awaited them next. Queen Leda of Sparta was experiencing one of those rare days that commenced with such exemplary precision, it instilled within her a profound appreciation for the simple, unadorned pleasure of being alive. The morning air was invigoratingly crisp and impeccably clean, carrying just a subtle hint of the approaching vernal season. She had efficaciously dispatched her royal duties early, which included arbitrating a dispute between two merchants, meticulously scrutinizing the household accounts, and consulting with the captain of the guard regarding security arrangements for an upcoming festival. Now, with the entire afternoon stretching unfettered before her, Leda resolved to embark on a leisurely stroll to the river. It was one of her most cherished retreats, a tranquil sanctuary where the water flowed with crystal clarity and a measured pace, its banks gracefully adorned by willow trees, whose verdant branches trailed elegantly in the gentle current. She frequently sought solace there when she required a period of contemplation, or simply wished to savor a few moments of serene peace, far removed from the unwavering pressures of palace life. Leda had reigned as queen for nearly 8 years by this juncture, ever since her bond of matrimony with King Tyndareus. Theirs was a commendable marriage, meticulously constructed upon foundations of mutual respect and genuine, deeply felt affection. Tyndareus was a benevolent sovereign, fair and equitable in his dealings with his subjects, and consistently generous towards his trusted friends. He did not expect Leda to be a mere decorative ornament. On the contrary, he highly valued her keen intelligence and frequently sought her perceptive counsel on weighty matters of state. Their shared existence was characterized by a comforting predictability and harmonious ease in the most desirable sense. They had established their cherished rituals, their shared interests, and their quiet, intimate moments together in the evenings, once the day's arduous work was concluded. Leda felt profoundly fortunate to have discovered such serene satisfaction in what had initially begun as a strategic political alliance between their respective noble families. On this particular afternoon, she leisurely strolled along the riverbank, thoroughly enjoying the way the dappled sunlight filtered through the delicate willow branches and danced playfully upon the water's shimmering surface. She had thoughtfully brought a small basket with her, contemplating the possibility of gathering some of the incipient wildflowers that were just beginning to unfurl, and she could already discern the bright green, nascent shoots of daffodils that promised to bloom in a matter of weeks. Leda discovered a comfortable spot on the verdant grassy bank and reposed herself, setting her basket gently beside her. She unburdened her feet by slipping off her sandals and allowed her toes to dangle in the cool, refreshing water, sighing with profound contentment. This, she realized, was precisely what she had needed: a moment of complete tranquility, accompanied by nothing but the melodious murmur of the flowing water and the gentle sylvan whisper of leaves in the soft breeze. She was just succumbing to a gentle reverie when an audible disturbance reached her ears from upstream. It sounded like a tumultuous splashing, as if something of considerable size had plunged into the water. Leda opened her eyes and directed her gaze towards the source of the sound, fully expecting to behold a deer or perhaps a dislodged branch that had been carried downstream by the current. Instead, she witnessed a magnificent swan. Yet this was no ordinary swan. It was colossal, far exceeding the size of any avian creature she had ever encountered, its feathers so impeccably white they seemed to glow with an ethereal luminescence in the afternoon sunlight. The majestic swan appeared to be in profound distress, flailing violently in the water, as if it were grievously injured or utterly debilitated. Leda's innate compassion immediately impelled her to offer assistance. She rose to her feet and waded into the river, her robes becoming cumbersome and heavy with water as she purposefully moved towards the struggling bird. "Easy now," she uttered reassuringly, her tone as gentle as if she were addressing a frightened horse. "Allow me to help you." The swan immediately ceased its frantic struggles and regarded her with eyes that seemed almost human in their perceptive intelligence. Up close, Leda could now discern that it possessed an even more breathtaking beauty than she had initially perceived. Its feathers were of unblemished perfection, without a single mark or imperfection, and its long, elegant neck curved with remarkable grace despite its apparent predicament. Leda tentatively extended her hand, exercising extreme caution, as she wished not to further alarm the magnificent bird. To her utter surprise, the swan made no attempt to recoil or swim away. Instead, it moved closer to her, as if actively seeking solace and comfort. She gently caressed its neck, marveling at the incomparable softness of its downy feathers. "There, there," she murmured, offering soothing endearments. "You are safe now. What happened to you, my beautiful one?" The swan then emitted a soft, unearthly melody, unlike any bird call she had ever heard. It was almost like singing, yet lower in pitch and profoundly more melodious. The exquisite sound seemed to reverberate through her entire body, inducing within her a strangely tranquilizing and dreamlike state. Leda persisted in her gentle ministrations, continuing to stroke the swan's neck, astonished by its remarkable docility. Most wild birds would have long since taken flight, but this unconventional creature appeared to be thoroughly enjoying her attention. It acquiesced gracefully to her touch, closing its eyes and producing that strange musical sound once more. As she stood there in the cool water, embracing the beautiful swan, Leda began to feel an enveloping somnolence. The afternoon sun was warm and languid on her face, and the melodious sound of the river seemed to gradually fade into the background. She felt as if she were drifting within a dream, moving through water that felt thick and viscous as liquid gold. The majestic swan's eyes parted, and Leda found her gaze drawn into their profound depths. They presented as dark and fathomless pools, reflecting an intellect that seemed to transcend the natural capacities of any creature. For a fleeting instant, a tremor of unease rippled through her, yet it swiftly dissipated. The swan's melodious call, a sound of such exquisite soothing and hypnotic quality, rendered her incapable of sustaining any vestige of alarm. Time itself appeared to decelerate, its chronological boundaries blurring as Leda remained immersed in the river, gently cradling the enormous avian form. The world surrounding her softened into a dreamlike tableau, as if she perceived everything through a shimmering veil of golden luminosity. A profound tranquility settled upon her, a sense of peace more encompassing than any she had experienced in many months. The swan's elegant neck curved protectively around her, and she felt the exquisite texture of its plumage against her skin. These feathers possessed an unparalleled softness, surpassing the finest silk, and seemed to radiate an inherent warmth. Leda found herself instinctively leaning into the bird's voluminous body, enveloped in an inexplicable sensation of safety and profound protection. She lost all track of the temporal passage, whether minutes or hours had elapsed. In that ethereal, golden realm, time seemed utterly devoid of meaning. Her sole awareness was an utter contentment, an unwavering conviction that this precise moment by the riverside was her destined place. Eventually, a subtle shift in the ambient light pierced her reverie. The sun had descended lower in the western sky, and the encroaching shadows stretched their elongated forms across the landscape. The swan, too, appeared to register this environmental alteration, commencing a gentle, deliberate movement slowly disentangling itself from her encircling arms. Leda experienced a sharp pang of loss, a deep ache of bereavement, as the magnificent creature prepared for its departure. Never before had she forged such a profound connection with any living being, and the mere contemplation of reverting to her mundane existence suddenly felt unbearable. "Do not leave," she whispered, a hushed, desperate entreaty. Yet the swan was already gliding away from her, swimming with effortless grace towards the deeper currents of the river. It paused once, turning its head to cast a final look upon her. And again, Leda was struck by the unmistakable sagacity emanating from its eyes. The swan emitted its melodious call one last time, a poignant refrain that seemed to encapsulate all the beauty and sorrow inherent in the world. Then it unfurled its enormous wings and ascended into flight, disappearing into the vast expanse of the sky with such breathtaking swiftness that Leda was left to question the very veracity of the entire encounter. She stood alone in the river's chill embrace, feeling suddenly cold and profoundly disoriented. The water swirling around her ankles felt shockingly real, a stark return to tangibility after the ethereal experience she had just undergone. Her gaze swept across the surroundings, half expecting to discern some lingering vestige, any telltale sign that the swan had indeed been present. But the river appeared precisely as it had before. Leda waded back to the shore, her sodden robes clinging to her body like a second skin. She felt subtly different, irrevocably changed in a way she could not quite articulate, as if she were now perceiving the world through an entirely new lens. She retrieved her basket and sandals, moving with the slow, deliberate pace of one newly roused from a deep, profound slumber. The walk back to the palace seemed unusually protracted, and she found herself pausing frequently to rest, overcome by an inexplicable, pervasive exhaustion. In the ensuing weeks, Leda's thoughts frequently drifted back to the majestic swan. She would often catch herself staring idly out of windows, her eyes scanning the heavens for a fleeting glimpse of alabaster plumage. She undertook repeated pilgrimages to the riverbanks, ardently hoping to behold the beautiful bird once more, but it never reappeared. Her nights became filled with vivid, often unsettling dreams, replete with images of vertiginous descents and soaring ascents, of polyglot whispers and voices speaking in esoteric tongues she did not recognize. She would awaken feeling profoundly fatigued, as if her spirit had traversed vast, unseen landscapes during her sleep. And gradually, she began to perceive undeniable changes occurring within her own physical form. She found herself consuming more food, yet paradoxically experiencing less hunger, sleeping for extended periods, yet feeling less rested. Her garments began to feel constricting around her waist, and she was periodically overcome by sudden intense waves of nausea. When the dawning comprehension of her condition finally arrived, Leda experienced a complex tapestry of elation and bewilderment. She was indeed going to bear a child, but not merely one. She could distinctly sense the unmistakable presence of two distinct lives burgeoning within her, and somehow she possessed a preternatural certainty that they would be extraordinary. Her mind revisited the majestic swan, those piercingly intelligent eyes, and that melancholic, resonant cry. She recalled the ethereal unreality of their encounter, the way time had seemed to cease its march while she held the exquisite avian presence, and a nascent conviction began to form. Her progeny would transcend mortal boundaries. As the months passed and her pregnancy progressed with its inexorable march of gestation, Leda felt a burgeoning sense of eager expectation. She remained uncertain of the precise nature of the children she would bear, but an unwavering belief in their unique destiny held firm. They would carry within them an indelible imprint of that enchanted afternoon by the river, a distillation of the celestial bird's grace and enigmatic aura. When the appointed hour of parturition finally arrived, Leda felt no astonishment regarding the extraordinary nature of her offspring. They emerged not as conventional infants, but as something far more unusual, manifesting in a manner profoundly atypical. Though that is a chronicle reserved for a subsequent tranquil hour, when humanity is prepared to embrace the peculiar marvels that can occur when divine beings intermingle with earthly existence, assuming guises as commonplace as respiration. For now it will suffice to say that Leda's serene riverside interlude irrevocably reshaped her existence, with consequences both aesthetically magnificent and deeply consequential. It is often the case that life's most pivotal junctures present themselves cloaked in the guise of unremarkable interactions, and frequently the most magnificent entities manifest themselves without prior warning, seeking merely the benevolence of our spirits and the receptiveness of our innermost selves. One might readily assume that an election by the sovereign of the pantheon would herald an era of unparalleled exhilaration. Yet, for Alcmena, a distinguished princess hailing from Tyrans, this divine favor primarily translated into an arduous regimen of anticipation, an extensive and often tedious period of deferment. Envision the landscape of ancient Greece. Approximately in the year 1300 BCE, the solar disk descends majestically behind the rugged topography of Tiryns, casting elongated silhouettes stretching across the formidable stone ramparts of the royal residence. Alcmena herself occupies a position by her casement, observing the final embers of daylight recede from the celestial expanse. Her matrimonial union with Amphitryon had only recently been consecrated, yet her consort had already embarked upon another military campaign. Alcmena's days unfolded in the customary pursuits befitting a woman of noble birth. She diligently worked at her loom, the shuttle traversing the warp and weft with a consistent, almost meditative cadence. A crisp click, a gentle pull, a repeated click, another measured pull. The fibers of the wool, exquisitely fine and supple beneath her touch, were imbued with rich indigo and regal amethyst hues, whose material value surpassed the annual income of the vast majority of the populace. Her current endeavor was the fabrication of a magnificent cloak, intended for Amphitryon's eventual homecoming, the precise timing of which remained shrouded in uncertainty. Household retainers glided silently through the palatial corridors, attending to their duties of sweeping, polishing, and culinary preparation for repasts that Alcmena frequently partook of in solitude. Her principal companion was Galanthus, her venerable nursemaid, a constant presence since Alcmena's tenderest years. Their discourse encompassed the quotidian, meteorological conditions, the verdant state of the palace gardens, and the impending readiness of the olive harvest. Unbeknownst to Alcmena, Zeus, the supreme sovereign of the Olympian pantheon, had been keenly observing her existence. This surveillance was not predicated on amorous affection, but rather akin to the detached fascination one might accord a particularly intriguing insect within a cultivated plot. He had, in his divine wisdom, ordained her to be the progenitor of the most formidable hero in all of history. The birth of Hercules was a foregone conclusion, and Alcmena had been specifically selected for this monumental task. The primary impediment, however, lay in the precise synchronicity of events. While a visitation to Alcmena was imperative, a direct manifestation in his true thunderous form was out of the question. Flashes of lightning and resonant peals of thunder were hardly conducive to discretion. Consequently, he resolved to assume the exact likeness of her husband, Amphitryon. This strategic impersonation necessitated an extended period of patience, ensuring Amphitryon's substantial distance from Tyrans to preclude any untimely or inconvenient appearance of the genuine spouse. Thus, Zeus found himself engaged in a prolonged vigil, an enduring exercise in temporal deferment. Concurrently, Alcmena maintained the unwavering rhythm of her quotidian existence. She awakened pre-dawn in accordance with the established customs for virtuous women, and offered fervent supplications to Hera, the revered goddess of matrimonial bonds. Unaware of the cosmic machinations, she remained oblivious to Hera's nascent animosity towards her, stemming from an event yet to transpire. The sheer irony of this situation would border on the comedic, were its implications not so profoundly sorrowful. Following her devotions, Alcmena partook of her morning meal, consisting of wholesome bread and golden honey, perhaps supplemented by a portion of cheese, contingent on the recent fecundity of the palace goats. Her responsibilities extended to scrutinizing the household ledgers, a meticulous task ensuring the domestic staff refrained from excessive pilfering of provisions or precious olive oil. Such administrative duties, while undeniably monotonous, were nonetheless essential, demanding vigilant oversight. The days gradually coalesced into an indistinct continuum, a phenomenon characteristic of periods marked by significant anticipation. Alcmena might seek solace in a leisurely stroll through the palace gardens, where the vibrant crimson blossoms of the pomegranate trees descended like a shower of dispersed rubies. Alternatively, she might return to her loom, meticulously advancing the fabrication of Amphitryon's cloak by a few additional inches. The design, a sophisticated frieze depicting a procession of graceful deer in motion, had evolved into a remarkably elaborate motif, a testament to her dedicated artistry over many weeks. At last, Zeus deemed the propitious moment had arrived. Assuming the precise semblance of Amphitryon, he made his approach towards the palace walls as the sun began its descent below the horizon. However, it was at this juncture that events took an unexpectedly peculiar, almost mundane turn. Zeus swiftly ascertained that a single nocturnal period would prove insufficient to guarantee the successful conception of Hercules. He required an extended duration. Consequently, he commanded the sun to cease its celestial journey. This was not accomplished with any ostentatious display. No thunderous halt of Apollo's fiery chariot was observed across the heavens. Rather, the sun simply failed to ascend. The night thus elongated, stretching interminably onward. What ordinarily constituted an 8-hour span transmuted into 16, then 24, and ultimately a staggering 36 hours. Alcmena, in her initial delight, remained entirely oblivious to this cosmic manipulation. Her attention was wholly consumed by the joyous fact of her husband's premature return from military service. The figure she believed to be Amphitryon regaled her with elaborate accounts of the recent campaign, recounting tales of formidable adversaries vanquished and strategic urban centers subjugated. Tonight, his discourse possessed an unfamiliar, almost lyrical eloquence, a heightened poeticism beyond his customary manner. Yet, she mused, the crucible of warfare often profoundly alters individuals. Perhaps it had instilled in him a deeper, contemplative spirit. They shared their evening meal by the soft glow of lamplight. The household staff had meticulously prepared a succulent lamb, seasoned with fragrant herbs freshly gathered from the garden, accompanied by bread still warm from the hearth. Wine, appropriately diluted with water, was also served. Their discussion turned to their shared future, encompassing their aspirations for progeny and the cherished plan to name their inaugural son in honor of Amphitryon's esteemed father. As the hours of the night slowly accumulated, Alcmena found herself increasingly disquieted. The absence of the sun, which should have long since ascended, was a profound anomaly. Her entire existence had been intricately woven into the predictable tapestry of day and night, her very being attuned to the precise moment of dawn's arrival, even if her conscious mind did not meticulously record the passage of time. Throughout the household, a palpable unease began to ripple through the ranks of the servants. They converged in the kitchen, their gazes darting anxiously towards the windows that stubbornly refused to yield to the encroaching light. The roosters, those heralds of morning, had by now expended their voices in futile cries and had fallen silent. Even the normally placid dogs seemed afflicted by the strangeness, whimpering softly and restlessly pacing rather than succumbing to slumber. Alcmena attempted to broach the subject of this peculiar, unending night with her husband, but he skillfully diverted her inquiries with tender kisses and soothing words. He appeared utterly undisturbed by the unprecedented cessation of the world's diurnal rotation. This inexplicable nonchalance should have served as a glaring indicator, yet Alcmena, overwhelmed by the sheer joy of his presence after his long absence, found herself incapable of critical thought. Unbeknownst to her, the true Amphitryon was still many days' march away, diligently returning from his genuine military campaign. He remained entirely oblivious to the fact that his wife was currently hosting the sovereign deity of the Olympian pantheon, or that the child burgeoning within her was destined to emerge as the most celebrated champion in the annals of Greek mythology. The interminable night persisted, casting an enduring shadow over Alcmena's abode. The household gradually settled into an unfamiliar and disorienting routine. Deprived of the sun's reliable demarcation of time, the servants struggled to discern appropriate periods for preparing sustenance or seeking repose. Some succumbed to sporadic, restless dozing in secluded corners, while others remained wide awake, too agitated by the perpetual darkness to find any solace in sleep. Alcmena herself observed that she felt no weariness, despite having been awake for what felt like 2 full days. It was as though time itself had become dense and viscous, its customary flow profoundly altered. She and the man she sincerely believed to be her spouse conversed for extended periods, traversing topics both profound and trivial. He regaled her with vivid accounts of far-flung territories and exotic customs, discoursing on the ethereal harmony of the spheres and the nuanced hues of clouds at twilight. Ultimately, Zeus concluded that his amorous objective had been fulfilled. With a divine decree, he permitted the sun to commence its ascent, thereby bringing an end to the most protracted night within mortal recollection. The light, pale and hesitant, diffused itself gradually across the sky, as if it too harbored a degree of bewilderment regarding the preceding events. Alcmena gazed upon this belated sunrise from her chamber window, a strange melancholy settling upon her spirit. The night, for all its beauty, had possessed an inexplicable strangeness she could not quite articulate. Her husband then made preparations for another departure, asserting that some outstanding matters required his attention before his definitive return home. She bid him farewell with a kiss, entirely unaware that her lips were touching those of the king of the gods himself. He pledged to rejoin her soon, and she, with unwavering faith, believed his promise. After all, what conceivable reason would her devoted husband have to deceive her? A mere few days later, the authentic Amphitryon finally reached his home. He was encrusted with the dust of his extensive journey and profoundly fatigued, his thoughts having been solely occupied with his wife throughout his arduous trek. He presented her with a thoughtful gift, a magnificent bronze mirror he had procured through trade in a distant metropolis. However, when he began to recount his recent military exploits, Alcmena regarded him with a peculiar expression. "But you have already shared all of this with me," she stated, "just a few nights ago, during that remarkably long and strange night when the sun refused to rise." Amphitryon was utterly perplexed. He had not been present a few nights prior. He had still been 3 days' march away, enduring the discomfort of sleeping on hard ground and subsisting on meager travel rations. What precisely was his wife referencing? The profound truth slowly dawned upon both of them, much like the hesitant sunrise they had so recently experienced. Alcmena grasped that her enigmatic, eloquent husband had been an entirely different entity. Amphitryon, in turn, realized that his wife had been graced, or perhaps afflicted, by a visit from a god. Neither party was entirely certain how to process this revelation. Nevertheless, the consequences, if one could term them as such, were already irrevocably set. In 9 months' time, Alcmena would give birth to twins. One would be an ordinary infant, Amphitryon's legitimate son, Iphicles. The other would be Hercules, the progeny of Zeus, destined for a life replete with both monumental greatness and profound tragedy. As you prepare to surrender to slumber this very evening, you might find yourself contemplating the experience of existing through a night that stretched into perpetuity. Would the sun's prolonged absence immediately register in your awareness? Or might you be too engrossed by other preoccupations to notice? And how would the knowledge that the gods had specifically selected you for a destiny you never sought resonate within your soul? Some errors unfold with a gradual, insidious progression, akin to water's relentless erosion of stone. Others manifest in a sudden, incandescent flash, searing all that it touches. Semele's pivotal misjudgment belonged to the latter category. It is unlikely that you have ever contemplated the intricacies of forming a romantic attachment with an individual who commands the very elements. Most individuals have not, yet Semele, a princess of Thebes, found herself entangled in precisely such a predicament, and the ramifications proved far more intricate than one might anticipate. Envision yourself transported to the heart of ancient Thebes, approximately in the year 1400 BCE. The venerable city occupied a commanding position atop a hill, affording sweeping vistas of the Boeotian plain, its formidable walls reputedly brought into being by the ethereal power of music itself. Semele resided within her father's grand palace, an expansive labyrinth of chambers and courtyards, where the soothing murmur of fountains harmonized with the rhythmic clip-clop of horses' hooves upon the stone pavements. Semile's days unfolded according to a meticulously established routine. She awoke with the first hint of dawn, preceding even the household servants, and proceeded directly to the palace shrine to pour libations of wine for the gods. Though a seemingly modest ritual, she approached it with profound reverence. The wine offered was always of the finest vintage, eschewing the diluted beverages served to ordinary guests, for the deities, in her estimation, merited nothing less than the absolute best. Following her prayers, she broke her fast with wholesome bread and succulent figs, perhaps augmented by a portion of cheese if the palace's dairy cows had proven cooperative. Subsequently, she reviewed the day's scheduled activities with Beroa, her personal servant, a woman of middle age who had been an integral part of the family's retinue since before Semile's birth. Her mornings might encompass the intricate art of weaving, that ceaseless endeavor that engaged the hands while allowing the mind to wander freely. Semele diligently worked upon a magnificent tapestry depicting the mythical narrative of Europa and the bull, entirely unaware that she was on the precipice of becoming the central figure in a strikingly analogous tale. The threads themselves were exquisite silk, meticulously imported from distant exotic lands, and they captured the ambient light in such a manner as to imbue the woven images with an almost lifelike vitality. Alternatively, she might dedicate her time to the palace gardens, where skilled horticulturists meticulously tended to verdant rows of fragrant herbs and vibrant flowers. Semele harbored a particular affection for the roses, which bloomed in an astonishing spectrum of reds and pinks, for which no human lexicon possessed adequate nomenclature. She frequently gathered a selection of these blossoms to adorn her personal chambers, savoring the way their delicate perfume intermingled with the rich, earthy scent of olive oil burning in the lamps. The afternoons were typically reserved for more communal engagements. Semele might receive callers from among the city's other noble women, and they would convene in the cool, shaded confines of the courtyard, engaging in animated discussions concerning the latest tidings from neighboring city-states, who was preparing for matrimony, who was celebrating the arrival of new offspring, or who had become embroiled in some minor social transgression involving a household retainer or a transient merchant. Yet, of late, Semele had found her attention wandering during these very conversations. Her gaze would repeatedly drift skyward, observing the subtle shifts and transformations of the clouds. Her companions had begun to notice her air of expectation, though she consistently declined to elaborate on its specific object. The truth of the matter was that Zeus had been assiduously courting her in his own distinct and unconventional manner. He did not dispatch floral arrangements or compose poetic verses. Instead, he dispatched the very weather itself. A gentle, nurturing rain would descend upon her garden precisely when the verdant foliage was most in need of sustenance. The wind would stir at the impeccably opportune moment, providing a refreshing coolness to her skin on a sweltering afternoon. Lightning would intermittently flicker across the distant horizon, never close enough to pose a genuine threat, yet sufficiently spectacular to elicit a gasp of awe. Initially, Semele dismissed these occurrences as mere coincidences. However, as the days progressed, she began to discern unmistakable patterns. The atmospheric conditions appeared to respond directly to her own emotional fluctuations. When she experienced happiness, the sun's radiance intensified. When sorrow enveloped her, a soft, sympathetic rain would fall, as if the heavens themselves were weeping in unison with her. One particular evening, as she ambled through the garden after her evening meal, Zeus finally manifested himself before her. Not in his true, overwhelming form, for such a revelation would have proven lethally dangerous, but rather as an exceedingly handsome young man with eyes the profound color of storm clouds. He was impeccably attired, though not in an ostentatious manner, resembling a prosperous merchant or perhaps a minor prince. "I have been observing you," he declared, a pronouncement that, in other circumstances, might have evoked greater alarm than it did. Yet there was an inherent quality in his voice that instilled a profound sense of security within Semele. It was deep and resonant, akin to the distant rumble of thunder echoing across expansive hills. Their clandestine meetings became a regular occurrence, always taking place in the secluded garden, invariably at the precise moment of sunset. Zeus enchanted her with enthralling narratives of remote locales, of islands where the grapes swelled with a sweetness rivaling honey, and towering mountains where the snow never yielded to the warmth of the sun. He judiciously omitted any mention of his marital status or his consort's notorious propensity for transforming his romantic interests into various unfortunate forms. Semele found herself anticipating these encounters with an intensity that surpassed all other daily activities. Zeus was unlike any man she had ever encountered. He possessed a keen intellect without being condescending, and wielded immense power without ever exhibiting cruelty. He listened intently when she articulated her aspirations of venturing beyond the familiar confines of Thebes, of experiencing the wider world beyond the city walls. Their courtship was characterized by a refined gentleness and an almost old-fashioned charm. They meandered along the garden paths, engaging in profound discourse on philosophy and the nuances of poetry. Zeus would carefully select flowers for her hair, always possessing an innate understanding of precisely which blooms would best complement her complexion. Occasionally, he would present her with small, unique tokens, a perfectly spherical stone discovered on a distant, pristine beach, or a feather shed by an avian species entirely unknown within the lands of Greece. After the passage of a few months, Semele realized she was pregnant. She harbored a degree of uncertainty regarding Zeus's potential reaction to this news, but when she confided in him, he appeared genuinely delighted. "This child will be extraordinary," he pronounced, and something in the authoritative yet tender timbre of his voice instilled a deep conviction within her. However, another entity had been keenly observing these romantic assignations, and she was far from pleased. Hera, Zeus's formidable wife, had become acutely aware of her husband's latest amorous preoccupation. She had been bound to him in matrimony for a sufficiently long duration to effortlessly discern the telltale indicators, the way he would hum contentedly to himself, the heightened attention he paid to his appearance before departing Olympus, and the unmistakable scent of unfamiliar flowers that clung to him upon his return. Hera, the formidable queen of the gods, determines that Semele must indeed be chastised. However, instead of resorting to her customary transformations, such as changing a rival into a bovine or an arboreal form, she devises a far more insidious and subtle scheme. Adopting the guise of Beroa, an elderly and trusted servant from Semele's household, Hera makes her way to visit the unsuspecting princess one languid afternoon. Semele, engrossed in her needlework, was meticulously adding strands of golden thread to the flowing locks of Europa on her intricate tapestry, when the woman she believed to be Beroa settled gracefully beside her. "You seem to possess a particular radiance these days," the deceptive Beroa remarked, observing Semele, who responded with a delicate blush that painted her cheeks. "I am, truly," Semele confessed, her voice a soft murmur. "I find myself deeply enamored. And does this individual reciprocate your affections, my dear?" The disguised goddess inquired with a knowing glance. "Yes, I believe he does," Semele affirmed, a hopeful lilt in her tone. "He certainly declares his love." The false Beroa nodded sagaciously, a veneer of wisdom masking her malicious intent. "But, my sweet child, how can you truly ascertain the veracity of such claims? Men, as a rule, are prone to uttering many pleasantries when they desire something from a woman. How can you be certain that he is not merely articulating what he presumes you wish to hear?" Semele's bright smile wavered, a fleeting shadow crossing her features. "He is not like that, I assure you. He is remarkably different." Semele hesitated, a moment of uncertainty clouding her expression. She had never actually divulged to anyone the extraordinary capabilities of Zeus, the peculiar manner in which he appeared to command the very elements. The notion, even to her own mind, sounded quite preposterous. "He is simply quite special," she managed to conclude. "Men of exceptional qualities are often the most perilous kind," the false Beroa observed with a deceptively gentle voice. "They possess an uncanny ability to persuade you to believe in illusions rather than realities. If his devotion to you is genuine, he ought to be unequivocally willing to furnish proof of it." Proof. What kind of proof could he offer? Semele questioned, her curiosity piqued. "Request that he reveal his authentic self to you, not merely the persona he adopts to impress you, but his unvarnished, true essence. Should he decline this request, then you will possess undeniable evidence that he has been dissembling all along." The insidious suggestion took root in Semele's fertile mind, embedding itself like a tenacious seed. Over the ensuing days, she found her thoughts increasingly consumed by it. When Zeus next graced her garden with his presence, she scrutinized his countenance, searching for any telltale signs of mendacity. He appeared sincere enough, she conceded, yet the persistent question lingered. What if he were merely an exceptionally skilled performer? Ultimately, she mustered the requisite courage to voice her demand. They were seated beside the tranquil fountain, observing the water capture the final fading rays of the setting sun, when she turned to him, her expression profoundly serious. "I find myself compelled to ask you something of great importance," she began. "Anything you desire?" Zeus responded, though an almost imperceptible shift in his tone suggested a sudden, profound wariness had seized him. "I wish for you to unveil your true identity to me, not merely this human form you assume during your visits, but your genuine, divine self." Zeus became utterly motionless, his gaze fixed upon her. "Semele, you are utterly unaware of the magnitude of your request. On the contrary, I am entirely aware. I yearn to behold you as you truly are. If your love for me is as profound as you claim, you will grant me this single wish." Zeus endeavored to explain the perilous folly of her insistence, emphasizing that mortal eyes were simply not fashioned to gaze upon the gods in their unadulterated forms. Yet, Semele having meticulously ruminated on this matter for days, was now unshakably convinced that his reluctance was irrefutable evidence of his deceit. "You promised me anything, did you not?" she pressed, and in that moment, Zeus recognized that he was inextricably ensnared by the very words he had uttered. With palpable reluctance, he acquiesced. He instructed her to prepare herself, to close her eyes and slowly count to 10. When she reopened them, he assured her, she would perceive him in his authentic manifestation. Semele complied precisely as she was told. She closed her eyes and began to count with deliberate slowness, her heart throbbing with a mixture of apprehension and eager anticipation. 1, 2, 3. She fully expected to witness him divested of his human disguise, perhaps adorned in different raiment or bearing a subtly altered visage. What she was utterly unprepared for was to behold the king of the gods in his full, unmitigated splendor, enshrouded by crackling lightning and radiating an overpowering might that blazed like a second sun. The illumination was so blindingly intense, it seared her very retinas. The raw electricity permeating the very air caused her hair to stand on end, each strand alive with static. The sheer, uncontainable presence of such potent divine power was utterly overwhelming, akin to attempting to cradle the entire boundless sky within her fragile human hands. Semele was granted but a fleeting instant to fully comprehend the cataclysmic reality of what was transpiring before the lightning utterly consumed her. She felt no anger, precisely. Rather, she was gripped by a sensation of profound surprise more than anything else. She had yearned to perceive the unvarnished truth, and now, at last, she had. Even as her form was engulfed in the inferno, Zeus, with swift, divine intervention, managed to snatch their unborn offspring from her womb, carefully sewing the nascent life into his own thigh, where the child would continue its gestation to term. The infant would eventually emerge as Dionysus, the revered god of wine and ecstatic revelry, forever bearing within his divine essence both the exuberant joy of his celestial power and the profound tragedy of his mortal mother's fiery demise. The underlying moral of this narrative, if indeed one can be definitively extracted, is undeniably subtle. It whispers that occasionally, the unembellished truth can prove to be far more perilous than any falsehood. It suggests that the very desires we believe we covet most ardently are sometimes the precise instruments of our own undoing. And perhaps most poignantly, it warns that the most hazardous inquiry one can pose is the one that receives an answer precisely as it was formulated and requested. Tonight, as you prepare to surrender to the embrace of sleep, you might find solace in contemplating the gentler, more unassuming truths woven into the fabric of your own existence. The delicate manner in which the first light of dawn filters through your bedroom curtains, the rhythmic, comforting sound of rain pattering softly on your roof, the simple, profound reassurance offered by the warmth of a familiar blanket. These diminutive, utterly ordinary truths are perhaps of infinitely greater value than any grand, divine revelation. They demand nothing from you save for your attentive recognition, and in return, they offer nothing but an unadulterated sense of peace. There exist certain vocations that are seemingly without end, tasks that stretch on into eternity. Consider, for instance, the immense responsibility of one who is tasked with retaining not merely their personal recollections, but the collective memories of every sentient being. This arduous duty falls upon Mnemosyne, and her work, in its daily execution, proves to be considerably less dramatic than one might instinctively surmise. One might readily envision the goddess of memory presiding over a tumultuous realm of earth-shattering disclosures and long-forgotten secrets. Yet in reality, the vast majority of memory's expanse is strikingly mundane. It encompasses the remembrance that your neighbor's canine companion is affectionately named Spot, that your sister prefers her coffee sweetened with precisely 2 sugars, or that a particular stone on the 3rd step of the temple stairs is slightly dislodged. Picture yourself transported to the nascent epochs of the world, a time when the earth itself was considerably younger, and the pantheon of gods were still in the nascent stages of orchestrating the cosmic order. Mnemosyne, unlike her more ostentatious brethren, does not possess a sprawling palace or an ornate throne. Her domain is something far more utilitarian and profound, a secluded, tranquil grove where she can reside in quiet contemplation. This grove exists in a paradoxical state, simultaneously nowhere and everywhere, a characteristic common to certain divine locales. A perpetual twilight hangs over the grove, that ethereal hour when the light is softened and the ambient air is refreshingly cool. Ancient, venerable oak trees form an impenetrable circle around a modest clearing, their branches so densely intertwined and expansive that they effectively obscure the greater portion of the sky. Only a scattering of distant stars remains visible through the narrow interstices, and these celestial bodies appear to hang motionless, fixed in their positions. In the precise center of this clearing lies a pool of water, so utterly still that its surface could easily be mistaken for a sheet of polished black glass. This is no ordinary water, however. It is the hallowed pool of memory, and its reflective surface does not mirror the present reality, but rather faithfully displays the indelible echoes of what has transpired. Were you to gaze into its depths, you might behold the joyous scene of your 3rd birthday celebration, or the poignant moment you first lost a childhood tooth, or perhaps the tender way your grandmother's hands moved as she patiently instructed you in the intricate art of knitting. Mnemosyne herself sits vigil beside this profound pool each and every day, observing the ceaseless procession of memories as they flow across its shimmering surface. Much like a slow-moving, eternal river, she possesses no power to select what she remembers. Everything, without exception, comes to her, regardless of her personal inclination, the momentous recollections and the utterly trivial ones, the joyous episodes and the sorrowful passages, all seamlessly intermingled in an unending, majestic stream. Today, her watchful gaze is fixed upon a memory of a diligent farmer in the ancient lands of Mesopotamia. He is meticulously counting his flock of sheep, gently touching each one upon its head as it ambles through the gate. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. The sheep are depicted as fluffy and pristine white, emitting soft, gentle bleating sounds as they proceed. The farmer's brow is furrowed with concern because one of his animals has recently developed a noticeable limp, and he remains uncertain as to the appropriate course of action. This particular memory will, in the natural course of events, gradually recede from the farmer's conscious mind within a few short days, supplanted by more immediate and pressing concerns. Yet, Mnemosyne will preserve it eternally, along with the precise angle at which the afternoon light fell across the verdant pasture and the subtle whisper of the wind through the ripening barley fields. As the farmer's sheep memory gently dissipates, another distinct recollection immediately takes its place upon the pool's reflective canvas. This particular scene showcases a young child in ancient Egypt, meticulously practicing her nascent letters upon a shard of broken pottery. The hieroglyphs she painstakingly forms are somewhat wobbly and uneven, betraying her youthful inexperience, but her earnest effort is undeniable. Her teacher, a patient and seasoned scribe, gently guides her small hand as she carefully constructs the intricate symbol for water. This child will, in time, mature into the wife of a prosperous merchant, and she will skillfully employ her literacy to assist in the astute management of her husband's commercial ventures. However, she will never consciously recall this specific lesson, the unique tactile sensation of the clay beneath her small fingers, or the profound sense of pride that swelled within her when she finally rendered the symbol correctly. Only Mnemosyne retains these diminutive yet perfectly preserved moments. The work of memory, it must be reiterated, is far from glamorous. It is devoid of dramatic rescues or epic, world-altering battles. Instead, it is characterized by the steady, unceasing accumulation of the entire spectrum of human experience, meticulously gathered moment by moment, ordinary moment, day by unremarkable day. Mnemosyne observes a woman in ancient Greece patiently instructing her daughter in the timeless art of weaving. She witnesses a seasoned fisherman in the sun-drenched Mediterranean meticulously inspecting his nets for what must be the 1,000th time. She quietly observes a small child in ancient China diligently learning the delicate technique of using chopsticks, inadvertently dropping grains of rice onto the floor, while his parents respond with gentle, affectionate laughter. Each individual memory holds significance, not because it is inherently extraordinary, but precisely because it is profoundly human. These countless, unassuming moments collectively form the rich, intricate texture of life itself, providing the essential backdrop against which all the celebrated, heroic narratives eventually unfold. Even the greatest heroes require someone to remember not merely their triumphant victories, but also the scraped knees of their childhood and the soothing lullabies sung by their mothers. Mnemosyne's role extends beyond mere storage. She also functions as a meticulous curator, carefully sorting these myriad recollections. Some memories are destined to be preserved with absolute fidelity, serving as precise historical records. Others are intended to undergo a transformative evolution over time, eventually becoming cherished stories that impart valuable lessons or offer profound comfort. Still others are fated to gently fade, leaving behind only a faint, almost imperceptible impression. She does, in fact, have an occasional helper in this monumental endeavor, though she remains uncertain if he would readily apply that particular designation to himself. Zeus, the mighty king of the gods, master of the boundless sky and the tumultuous weather, frequents her quiet grove with a peculiar regularity, drawn by an inexplicable force he cannot quite articulate. Yet, within Mnemosyne's serene presence, he experiences an unexpected and profound sense of peace. Their unique relationship blossoms slowly, organically, over countless unhurried visits. Zeus will materialize at the verdant edge of the grove, typically as evening descends, and they will simply sit together by the tranquil pool, often in companionable silence. Occasionally, he will inquire about a particular memory, and she, in turn, will unveil scenes from the distant past, vividly reflected upon the pool's enigmatic surface. He might inquire, his voice carrying a sense of wonder, "Do you recall the inaugural rainfall?" In response, she would unfurl a vivid tableau before his mind's eye, the nascent clouds coalescing above the pristine, primordial earth, illustrating the precise moment the initial droplets descended, striking the unblemished ground and causing delicate, ephemeral wisps of dust to rise. On a subsequent occasion, he would pose another query: "And do you remember the very first song ever sung?" With effortless grace, she would then present him with the tender image of an early human, a cave dweller, softly humming a lullaby to her infant, the tune resonating with a profound simplicity and an inherent, touching sweetness. Gradually, these encounters blossomed into a well-established routine. Zeus, the king of the gods, would arrive bearing tidings from the expansive external realm, recounting tales of the other deities and their myriad, often tumultuous, dramas and intricate power plays. Mnemosyne, for her part, would attend with courteous deference, yet her true fascination lay not in the grand narratives, but in the subtle, often overlooked minutiae that Zeus scarcely considered worth mentioning. Her keen perception registered the meticulous manner in which Hera meticulously arranged the blossoms within her verdant garden, the precise, shifting hue of cerulean that would infuse Poseidon's eyes when his thoughts drifted to the abyssal depths of the ocean, and the almost imperceptible soft murmur Athena emitted when deeply engrossed in grappling with a particularly intractable intellectual quandary. Following a multitude of such frequent visits, Zeus eventually extended a proposal of matrimony to Mnemosyne. This was not, however, an overt or formalized union in the conventional sense, as he was already bound to Hera through a political arrangement meticulously crafted to serve significant, far-reaching purposes within the divine hierarchy. Instead, his proposition was made in an ancient, more profound manner, a bond intended to intertwine hearts and intellects rather than merely link kingdoms or secure alliances. Mnemosyne assented, though she herself harbored a degree of uncertainty regarding her precise motivations. Perhaps it was because Zeus appeared to be the singular entity who genuinely apprehended the immense gravitas of her ceaseless labor. He bore the onerous responsibility of governing the pantheon of gods, just as she carried the equally immense burden of preserving every single memory. Both, in their distinct capacities, served as custodians of forces and concepts far surpassing their individual selves. Their wedding ceremony unfolded with an understated quietude, its only witnesses being the ephemeral, night-blooming flowers and the myriad stars twinkling through the ancient oak leaves overhead. There was no exchange of ornate rings, nor were any elaborate ceremonial vows uttered. Instead, their commitment was a simple, yet profound, promise to share their respective solitudes, to experience the profound state of being alone together, rather than remaining isolated and alone apart. Their honeymoon, a period of deep connection, extended over 9 consecutive nights, and on each of these nights, they conceived a daughter. These 9 daughters were destined to become the Muses, the revered goddesses who would later inspire all forms of art, literature, and learning throughout the ages. However, that grand narrative is reserved for a different telling. For this evening, our focus remains on the serene, hushed months preceding their birth, a time when Mnemosyne's sacred grove cradled not merely the indelible memories of the past, but also the nascent, vibrant promise of the future. As her divine pregnancy advanced, Mnemosyne observed a profound shift occurring within the very fabric of her work. While she continued to absorb and catalog every memory that traversed the world's currents, a novel faculty began to emerge. She started to perceive not just what was, but also potential memories, events that might unfold, melodies that might be composed and sung, narratives that might eventually be recounted. Her extraordinary vision allowed her to witness, for instance, an as yet unborn poet in the verdant lands of ancient Greece, meticulously crafting verses that evoked the tempestuous, wind-dark sea. She glimpsed a painter, centuries hence, diligently blending pigments on a palette, striving to capture the precise, ephemeral hue of the nascent morning light. Further still, she observed a musician in an epoch so remote that the very contours of the terrestrial landscape had been irrevocably altered, plucking strings to conjure sounds and harmonies utterly alien to Mnemosyne's prior experience. These profound insights into the burgeoning future proved considerably more arduous and draining than the recall of established past memories. Memories of yesteryear possessed a fixed, immutable quality, akin to tangible stones that one could firmly grasp in the palm of a hand. Conversely, future memories were fluid and inherently uncertain, much like the elusive challenge of attempting to ensnare water within a porous net. Yet Mnemosyne comprehended that this expanded capacity was now an integral component of her evolving divine function. She was no longer merely preserving the chronicle of what had been. She was actively contributing to the subtle shaping of what would be. Her future daughters, upon their eventual arrival, would each inherit distinct facets of this extraordinary gift. One would dedicatedly recall and inspire the composition of epic poetry. Another would meticulously focus upon the intricate tapestry of history. A third would specialize in the evocative realm of love songs. Each muse, in essence, would appropriate a segment of their mother's boundless and all-encompassing memory, meticulously transforming it into something accessible and beneficial for humankind. Nevertheless, for the present, throughout these serene and unassuming months preceding their arrival, Mnemosyne steadfastly continued her essential work. She would often be found seated beside the tranquil pool, observing the ceaseless, uninterrupted flow of memories, meticulously cataloging and archiving each one within the boundless, intricate library of her divine mind. Her recollections encompassed a Roman baker in antiquity, diligently kneading dough in the profound stillness of the pre-dawn darkness. She remembered an ancient Israeli shepherd, patiently counting the myriad stars as his flock slumbered peacefully beneath the vast sky. She also recalled a venerable grandmother in ancient China, her voice soft with affection, weaving tales for her attentive grandchildren by the flickering glow of an oil lamp. Each individual memory constituted a poignant, miniature gift, a fleeting yet profound moment of human experience meticulously preserved against the relentless current of time. These were not dramatic or world-altering events. They were simply, unequivocally true, and in their own quiet, unassuming manner, they possessed an undeniable, profound beauty. As an individual drifts toward the embrace of slumber this evening, one might find oneself contemplating their own cherished recollections. The distinct taste of a mother's home-cooked meal, the rhythmic patter of rain upon the roof of one's childhood abode, the uninhibited laughter of a dearest friend in a moment of genuine joy. These intimate memories are now integral components of Mnemosyne's vast collection, safeguarded within the boundless archive of collective human experience. And perhaps, in some tranquil grove existing beyond the constraints of time, a benevolent and gentle goddess vigilantly oversees them all, ensuring that nothing genuinely significant is ever truly lost to oblivion. There exist individuals whose exceptional intellect proves to be a double-edged sword, often leading to unforeseen complications. Metis, however, possessed a mind so extraordinarily astute that it surpassed the collective wisdom of all, including the formidable gods themselves. Her narrative serves as a cautionary tale regarding the inherent perils of perpetual correctness and how an indispensable nature can, paradoxically, become the most hazardous attribute of all. One has likely never truly pondered the experience of being unequivocally the most intelligent entity in every single space entered. This was not merely the kind of intelligence that garners academic accolades or facilitates the swift resolution of intricate puzzles, but rather a profound sagacity that enabled her to discern the intricate interconnectedness of all phenomena. Such was the unparalleled intellect of Métis, and this unique cognitive faculty rendered her existence far more intricate than intelligence typically tends to do. To truly grasp her essence, an observer might endeavor to conceive of the nascent cosmos in those primordial epochs when the divine beings were still in their youth, and the fundamental laws governing the universe were still in the process of being inscribed. Métis did not reside within the confines of a grand palace or a revered temple. Her abode was rather a locale far more challenging to articulate, an ethereal space existing betwixt thoughts, a vast library constructed from pure, unadulterated possibility. Were one able to gain access to her dwelling, one would discover it teeming with concepts and artifacts that had yet to fully materialize. Tomes penned in languages not yet conceived by any culture. Cartographic representations of nations that remained mere nascent ideas within the human consciousness, and sophisticated instruments designed to quantify phenomena for which no terminology yet existed. Every single item was arranged with impeccable order, yet this organization adhered to principles that would remain utterly unfathomable to anyone save Métis herself. Métis herself possessed a beauty characterized by a subtle, unassuming elegance. Her dark tresses were typically gathered into a straightforward braid, and her eyes, remarkably, would undergo discernible shifts in color, reflecting the nature of her current cogitations. When she was deeply immersed in the intricate process of resolving a complex problem, their hue would transform to a shimmering silver. In moments of profound sorrow, they would deepen into an intense, melancholic blue. And when she experienced anger, an emotion rare for her, they would flash with a brilliant gold, reminiscent of nascent lightning. Her days were consumed by the very activity that defines beings of extraordinary intellect, presciently addressing and resolving intricate challenges that others had not even begun to recognize as existing. On this particular day, she was engrossed in an especially intricate philosophical inquiry concerning the fundamental nature of time itself. Did the temporal continuum progress linearly, akin to an ever-flowing river consistently moving in a singular direction? Or was it perhaps more analogous to a vast, still pool where the past and the future coexisted simultaneously? She was enveloped by an array of meticulously drawn charts and complex diagrams, all densely covered with enigmatic symbols that would appear utterly nonsensical to any other observer. Yet for Métis, these constituted a language as lucid and comprehensible as the very words currently being read. Her unparalleled discernment allowed her to perceive intricate patterns that eluded others and to identify profound connections that remained entirely unnoticed by less acute minds. Consequently, the other deities frequently sought recourse to her unparalleled wisdom whenever they encountered intractable dilemmas they were incapable of resolving independently. These were not the straightforward difficulties, those they could competently manage on their own, but rather the profoundly complex ones, the formidable challenges that demanded genuine, innovative intellectual engagement. Athena, for instance, would seek her counsel when striving to conceptualize a novel form of defensive armor that could confer maximum protection without incurring excessive weight. Hephaestus, the divine smith, would present himself when grappling with a particularly recalcitrant piece of metal that defied his formidable skill. Even Hera, who typically harbored the conviction that she possessed all conceivable solutions, would on occasion appear before Métis, seeking insights into the intricate dynamics of celestial governance and divine politics. Métis, in turn, would accord each of them her unwavering, patient attention. She would pose a series of meticulously formulated, incisive inquiries, not with any intention of ostentatiously displaying her superior intellect, but rather to acquire a precise and comprehensive understanding of their exact requirements. Subsequently, she would devise resolutions characterized by such an exquisite elegance and so perfectly tailored to the specific problem at hand, that in the light of retrospective clarity, they appeared utterly self-evident. However, her most recurrent caller was unequivocally Zeus himself. He had been seeking her presence for centuries untold, ever since he first successfully orchestrated the overthrow of his tyrannical father and ascended to reign supreme as the king of the gods. Initially, his visits were primarily driven by pressing inquiries concerning the complexities of governance. How, he wondered, could one possibly maintain harmonious peace among deities who each harbored the conviction that they alone should wield ultimate authority? How could one formulate momentous decisions that would irrevocably impact the entirety of the vast universe? Métis assisted him in navigating these profound challenges, not by furnishing him with ready-made answers, but rather by guiding him through the rigorous intellectual process of thoroughly contemplating the questions themselves. She imparted to him the invaluable skill of examining problems from multifaceted perspectives, of carefully weighing consequences he had previously overlooked, and of ultimately discovering equitable resolutions that could genuinely satisfy all parties involved. As the eons unfolded, Zeus's motivations for visiting her evolved beyond mere counsel. He began to seek her company for the sake of companionship itself. Métis stood as one of the exceedingly rare beings capable of maintaining pace with the swift currents of his formidable intellect, able to track his intricate ideas without ever becoming disoriented or overwhelmed by their sheer scope. Their wide-ranging conversations traversed a diverse spectrum of subjects, from the profound tenets of philosophy and the intricate machinations of politics, to the inherent nature of beauty and the elusive meaning of justice. Ultimately, Zeus extended a proposal of marriage to Métis. This was not the formalized, strategic union he would later undertake with Hera, but rather a more ancient and profound sacred covenant, one designed to inextricably bind not just their hearts, but also their formidable intellects. Métis assented to the proposal, despite harboring certain reservations concerning the suitability of the match. Her extraordinary foresight allowed her to perceive the unfolding future with a clarity far beyond Zeus's comprehension. She apprehended that their relationship would inevitably grow intricate, that Zeus would eventually succumb to jealousy regarding her superior abilities, and that their inherent differences would, in time, manifest as significant challenges. Yet she also possessed the profound knowledge that their union was destined to produce something of immense importance. A daughter who would inherit both Zeus's unparalleled power and her own boundless wisdom. Their wedding ceremony, true to their nature, was an unassuming yet intellectually profound affair. Rather than exchanging precious rings as symbols of their bond, they engaged in a reciprocal exchange of intricate ideas. Instead of pledging eternal affection, they solemnly vowed to think in concert, to collaboratively solve challenges, and to confront the future as a unified front, leveraging their formidable combined intelligence. The initial years of their marriage unfolded with a serene and quiet contentment. Zeus would consistently present Metis with complex problems sourced from every corner of the vast universe, and together, they would engage in synergistic collaboration to resolve them. They meticulously designed innovative legal frameworks for the governance of burgeoning mortal cities. They ingeniously determined how to precisely calibrate and balance the elemental forces of nature, thereby ensuring Earth's continued habitability. They even succeeded in formulating a more streamlined and efficient system for organizing the myriad celestial bodies across the cosmos. Metis, the goddess of wisdom, found herself with child, and both she and Zeus, the king of the gods, eagerly anticipated the arrival of their offspring. Metis possessed an innate perception that this unborn infant would be truly exceptional, endowed not merely with formidable strength, but with a profound sagacity that would eclipse even her own formidable intellect. During the entire duration of her gestation, she devoted herself to meticulously devising instructional frameworks and pedagogical systems, meticulously crafting lessons intended to cultivate the child's burgeoning potential to its absolute zenith. However, a pivotal turning point arrived when Zeus was confronted with a dire prophecy that irrevocably altered their trajectory. The Fates, those ancient and formidable goddesses who meticulously weave the intricate tapestry of mortal and divine destinies, manifested before him to deliver a solemn admonition. They foretold that Metis was destined to bear 2 children. The first would be a daughter, whose wisdom would stand as an equal to Zeus's own. Yet it was the second child, a son, who posed the true peril. For he was fated to surpass Zeus in sheer power and ultimately depose him, mirroring the very act by which Zeus had himself usurped his own tyrannical father, Cronus. Zeus was consumed by an overwhelming dread. His terror was not kindled by the prospect of a daughter who matched his intellect. He could readily accommodate a consort and progeny of comparable sagacity. Rather, the thought of a son destined to unseat him from his celestial throne was utterly intolerable. He had toiled with immense effort and cunning to ascend to the kingship of the gods, and he was absolutely unwilling to relinquish his hard-won dominion to anyone, least of all to his own flesh and blood. In his profound anxiety, he sought out Metis, confiding his deepest fears and desperately hoping that her unparalleled intelligence could conjure a viable solution. He reasoned that surely, with her extraordinary mental faculties, she could conceive of a method to avert the impending prophecy, perhaps by altering the very fabric of the future, or by discerning a subtle loophole within the fates' pronouncements. But Metis, after a period of profound and meticulous deliberation, delivered a pronouncement that Zeus was utterly disinclined to accept. The prophecy in its essence will indeed materialize, she declared with an air of somber certainty, not because its fulfillment is an unalterable decree in itself, but precisely because your strenuous efforts to circumvent it will paradoxically be the very mechanism that brings it to pass. Such is the inherent, often cruel irony of these matters of destiny. Zeus, unwilling to embrace the bleakness of her assessment, stubbornly refused to believe her words. For several arduous days, he immersed himself in a relentless mental exercise, striving to conceptualize any number of alternative courses of action, any conceivable pathway to elude his preordained fate. Yet, with each potential solution he meticulously formulated, he invariably encountered insurmountable flaws. If he were to commit the heinous act of infanticide, he recognized he would descend to the same abhorrent depths of depravity as his own father. If he chose to banish the child, the boy would inevitably mature nursing a profound hatred for his progenitor, destined to return seeking vengeance. And if he attempted to mold the child through upbringing, instilling unwavering loyalty, he foresaw that the prophecy, with its insidious reach, would cunningly discover a means to corrupt that very devotion. Ultimately, Zeus conceived of a resolution that was simultaneously ingenious in its design and utterly horrific in its implications. He would preempt the birth of his prophesied son by ensuring that Metis would be utterly incapable of conceiving or delivering a second child, and the sole, dreadful means to achieve this, he concluded, was to consume her entirely before the conception of the son could ever take place. He was acutely aware that Metis, with her formidable intellect, unwavering logic, and deep commitment to the shared future they had meticulously planned, would never willingly consent to such a ghastly scheme. Consequently, Zeus resolved to employ a cunning stratagem, twisting her very sagacity into the instrument of her undoing. He approached her one morning, presenting what appeared to be an innocuous and academically curious inquiry. "I have been deeply contemplating the intricacies of shapeshifting," he began, feigning a casual air. "You are, of course, intimately familiar with our divine capacity to assume a myriad of forms. I find myself pondering if there exist any intrinsic limitations to the degree of diminishment we can achieve." Metis, whose mind was perpetually captivated by intricate intellectual conundrums, immediately began to engage with the theoretical challenge. From a purely theoretical standpoint, she articulated, her thoughts already racing, there should be no inherent physical constraints. Form, after all, is fundamentally a matter of the organization of matter and energy. The same boundless consciousness that animates and fills a grand human physique should, by logical extension, be perfectly capable of residing within a form exponentially more diminutive. "Would you perhaps be willing to offer a demonstration?" Zeus inquired, his voice carefully modulated to convey the utmost nonchalance he could muster. Metis, genuinely thrilled by the intellectual and practical challenge, commenced her remarkable transformation, progressively reducing her physical stature. She first became the approximate size of a young child, then further diminished to the minute dimensions of a mouse, and subsequently to the even tinier form of a bee. Finally, with an astonishing feat of compression, she condensed herself into a single glistening drop of water, her vast and complex consciousness now miraculously contained within a form so infinitesimally small it could rest upon the tip of Zeus's finger. "Truly fascinating," Zeus uttered, his tone laced with a deceptive admiration. And before Metis could initiate the process of reverting to her original size, he swiftly and decisively swallowed her. The experience was profoundly disorienting for both of them. Metis found herself suspended within a peculiar internal realm, a space that was neither purely gastric nor entirely cerebral, but rather an enigmatic confluence of the two. She retained her complete selfhood, her formidable intellect, and her capacity for intricate thought. Yet she was irrevocably confined within the very corporeal form of Zeus, utterly unable to escape or to restore herself to her accustomed proportions. Zeus, concurrently, perceived her unparalleled intelligence beginning to seamlessly merge with his own. Instantly, his cognitive faculties were sharpened to an unprecedented degree. Problems that had previously appeared utterly intractable now presented themselves with surprising clarity and simplicity. Questions that had vexed his divine mind for millennia suddenly yielded self-evident answers. He had indeed acquired Metis's boundless wisdom, but this profound acquisition came at the unforgivable cost of her freedom. Over the ensuing months, Zeus gradually came to recognize that the perpetual presence of Metis within his being was a paradoxical existence, simultaneously a profound boon and an inescapable bane. He possessed the unparalleled ability to unravel any perplexing issue, to render any complex judgment, and to penetrate any intricate deception. Yet he was also subjected to the incessant murmur of her voice within his own mind, a relentless internal commentary on his decisions, a piercing discernment of his errors, and an unceasing stream of suggestions that he did not always wish to entertain. There were periods when she would fall silent for days, leading Zeus almost to forget her internal presence. But then, an unforeseen event would transpire, a particularly arduous decision to be made, a profoundly intricate problem demanding resolution, and he would distinctly perceive her formidable intelligence stirring within him, guiding him unerringly toward the correct answer. Metis, for her part, continued her extraordinary pregnancy within this bizarre internal sanctuary. Though physically tethered within Zeus's form, she remained steadfast in her maternal duties, meticulously nurturing and educating her unborn daughter, preparing her for a life that would diverge dramatically from their initial hopeful aspirations. When the predestined moment arrived for the child's birth, there was no semblance of a conventional delivery. Instead, Zeus was afflicted by an excruciating, debilitating headache that persisted for several agonizing days. Ultimately, the skilled smith god Hephaestus was compelled to cleave open Zeus's skull with a mighty axe, and from the gaping wound emerged Athena, fully grown, clad in gleaming armor, and radiating an aura of formidable power. Athena inherited not only her mother's profound intelligence, but also her father's immense authority. However, she also bore another, more subtle legacy: the inherent understanding that wisdom, in its purest and most potent form, frequently exacts a terrible and often personal toll. She thus ascended to become the revered goddess of strategic warfare and practical sagacity, consistently guiding both mortal heroes and divine beings to resolve their predicaments through meticulous thought and ingenious planning, rather than through mere brute force or unthinking aggression. But Metis herself remained forever imprisoned within the expansive labyrinth of Zeus's mind, an enduring voice of conscience and an inexhaustible fount of intelligence that he could never entirely suppress. In a profound sense, she had indeed averted the dire prophecy. Zeus would never be dethroned by a son, precisely because that son would never come into physical existence. Yet, in the very act of preventing this fate, she had also ensured that Zeus would never truly be free from her indelible influence. In the grand tapestry of cosmic events, Metis had, in the ultimate analysis, resolved the most intricate of problems: how to maintain an indispensable presence to an entity who possessed every conceivable motive to eliminate you. By permitting herself to be consumed, she had become an intrinsic, inseparable component of Zeus himself, rendering her removal an impossibility without simultaneously dismantling the very essence that empowered him as an effective and sovereign ruler. The underlying moral of this ancient narrative is both subtle in its implication and profoundly melancholic in its resonance. It suggests that, at times, the most intellectually brilliant individuals become ensnared within the intricate confines of their own exceptional intelligence. They possess the unique capacity to perceive profound solutions to complex problems that remain utterly invisible to others. Yet these very solutions frequently demand a personal cost, a sacrifice that others are never compelled to bear. Metis, through her unparalleled foresight and self-sacrifice, undeniably saved the cosmos from a potentially cataclysmic conflict between Zeus and his prophesied son. But she paid the ultimate price by surrendering her own cherished freedom to accomplish this monumental feat. Tonight, as you prepare to surrender to the embrace of sleep, you might allow your thoughts to drift toward the quieter, more unassuming forms of wisdom that subtly permeate your immediate surroundings. The gentle ingress of morning light as it bathes your kitchen table, the distant, familiar cadence of your neighbor's dog barking in the fading evening, the simple, unadulterated pleasure derived from a comforting cup of warm tea on a crisp, cold day. These modest wisdoms demand nothing from you beyond your attentive observation, and in return, they offer nothing more profound than a fleeting moment of tranquil peace. Sometimes, the most significant form of intelligence is not the kind that relentlessly illuminates every problem demanding resolution, but rather the kind that enables us to genuinely appreciate the simple, profound beauty of what we already possess. There exist certain invitations in life that one simply cannot decline, no matter how intensely one might wish to. The sea nymph Thetis was destined to learn this harsh truth through arduous experience, and her tale unfolds as an exhausting chronicle of being universally desired, yet belonging to no one. One might instinctively assume that dwelling as the most exquisite sea nymph in the vast expanse of the ocean would constitute an idyllic existence. Such an assumption, however, would be profoundly mistaken. Beauty, particularly of the divine and transcendent variety, invariably tends to draw considerable attention, and attention emanating from the powerful gods is, more often than not, a source of far greater tribulation than it is worth. Allow your imagination to transport you to the profound depths of the Aegean Sea, where the crystalline water is so extraordinarily clear it appears to be composed of liquid light. Here, Thetis resides within an opulent palace meticulously fashioned from vibrant coral and shimmering pearls, its grandeur augmented by gardens of sea anemones that pulse with their own gentle, ethereal luminescence. Schools of iridescent fish navigate the corridors like living jewels, and the very walls are adorned with an array of shells that emit melodic songs whenever the ocean currents gently caress them. Thetis herself possesses a beauty so transcendent that it would cause even the most eloquent poets to exhaust their lexicon of descriptive words. Her hair flows with the graceful undulation of seaweed in the current, its hues subtly shifting between verdant green and golden amber depending on the play of light. Her eyes mirror the profound, enigmatic color of the deepest ocean trenches, and her voice carries the inherent musicality of waves as they softly break upon a distant, unseen shore. She dedicates her days to the customary activities befitting a sea nymph. She meticulously tends to her submerged gardens, delicately coaxing the coral formations to flourish in aesthetically pleasing configurations. She communes with the intelligent dolphins, who serve as her messengers, relaying news from the bustling surface world. She extends aid to shipwrecked mariners, guiding them safely to shore, though she always takes meticulous care to remain unseen during her benevolent interventions. Her work is inherently peaceful and profoundly satisfying. There is an intrinsic serenity to life beneath the waves, where every movement is slow and gentle, where the temperature remains perpetually comfortable, the light ever soft and diffused, and the ambient sounds consistently musical. It is precisely the kind of existence that could imbue anyone with a profound sense of contentment. Yet Thetis is burdened by a significant predicament. She has unfortunately captured the attention of both Zeus, the formidable king of the gods, and Poseidon, the powerful king of the sea. Both deities are intent on making her their bride, and neither is accustomed to accepting refusal as an answer. Initially, their courtship assumes a subtle, almost understated quality. Zeus dispatches an array of magnificent gifts, pearls that radiate an intrinsic inner luminescence, strands of seaweed endowed with perpetual growth, and schools of fish that vocalize in harmonies so exquisite no mortal ear has ever had the privilege to discern them. Poseidon, determined not to be outdone by his brother, counters with even grander propositions, offering her dominion over vast, entire sectors of the ocean, bestowing upon her the formidable power to command the very tides and currents, and granting her the unique ability to communicate with every single creature inhabiting the boundless sea. The sea nymph Thetis, though inherently gracious, conveyed an unwavering resolve in her rejections. She expressed her gratitude for the opulent tributes presented to her, yet articulated unequivocally that the prospect of matrimony held no allure. Her existence, as it currently unfolded, brought her profound contentment. She harbored no desire for elevated authority, boundless dominion, or even an augmentation of the exquisite beauty she already possessed. Her sole wish was to be afforded the tranquility to cultivate her verdant submarine gardens and to offer succor to the occasional mariner cast adrift upon the tumultuous waves. However, the Olympian deities Zeus and Poseidon proved to be exceptionally unyielding in their pursuit. Their visitations to her resplendent coral palace escalated in frequency, each appearance accompanied by increasingly elaborate and enticing matrimonial overtures. Zeus, the sovereign of the gods, pledged to elevate her to the esteemed status of a full goddess, complete with her own consecrated temple and dedicated festival days across the mortal realm. Poseidon, the formidable ruler of the oceans, vowed to conjure entirely new aquatic domains for her to govern, vast and unexplored underwater kingdoms that would undeniably establish her as the most formidable sea goddess ever to grace the deep. This relentless attention soon became utterly suffocating. Thetis found herself unable to navigate her own watery realm without inevitably encountering one of her persistent suitors. They would even trail her to the surface, their divine forms shimmering in the dawn light, whenever she sought to witness the majestic spectacle of the sunrise. Her intimate conversations with the playful dolphins were constantly interrupted by their unwelcome presence. Furthermore, their intercessions even extended to her most charitable acts, appearing conspicuously as she endeavored to rescue drowning sailors, a situation that proved both deeply mortifying and utterly counterproductive to her compassionate efforts. Ultimately, Thetis arrived at the stark realization that her predicament demanded external intervention. This escalating crisis was far beyond her capacity to manage independently. Thus, she embarked upon a course of action rarely undertaken by the ethereal sea nymphs. She sought an audience with the enigmatic fates. These ancient arbiters of destiny resided within a cavernous sanctuary nestled at the very bottom of the deepest ocean trench, a realm where the abyssal waters were so profoundly dark and intensely cold that even the most audacious of the gods seldom dared to venture. They were primordial entities, predating the birth of Zeus or Poseidon, indeed, older than the vast majority of the universe itself. Their eternal task involved meticulously weaving the intricate threads of destiny upon a colossal loom that existed beyond the conventional confines of time and space. Thetis discovered them absorbed in the creation of an exceptionally complex tapestry, an immense fabric that appeared to depict the entire chronological history of the world, from its nascent origins to its ultimate conclusion. The threads employed in this monumental work encompassed every conceivable hue, alongside certain ethereal colors that possessed no earthly equivalent. The resulting pattern was so bewilderingly intricate, so densely layered with meaning, that prolonged contemplation of its depths caused her eyes to sting with an involuntary watering. "We have been anticipating your arrival," declared the first fate, her gaze unwavering from her ceaseless weaving. "You seek knowledge regarding your impending future," affirmed the second fate, punctuating her statement by precisely severing a thread with a pair of ancient scissors capable of cleaving far more than mere fibers. "Specifically, your inquiry pertains to the matter of marriage," interjected the third fate, deftly integrating a fresh thread into the unfolding cosmic design. Thetis offered a silent nod, though she harbored uncertainty as to whether her gesture was discernible in the profound gloom that enveloped the cavern. "Both Zeus and Poseidon harbor intentions of marrying me. I possess no desire to wed either of them, yet I am at a loss as to how to dissuade them from their persistent solicitations." The first fate emitted a soft, dry chuckle, a sound reminiscent of the wind rustling through withered leaves. "Oh, naive child, you mistakenly believe this narrative revolves around your personal desires. Impart the knowledge to her," instructed the second fate, addressing her third sister. "Indeed, inform her of the prophecy," concurred the third fate, her voice resonating with ancient wisdom. At last, the first fate lifted her gaze from her meticulously crafted tapestry. Her eyes, clouded and milky white with the immense burden of ages, somehow conveyed an unnerving clarity, making Thetis feel as though she were being perceived with an unprecedented depth of insight. "There exists a momentous prophecy concerning you, Thetis. You are destined to bear a son who will unequivocally surpass his father. Greater will he be in formidable strength, more profound in unwavering courage, and more illustrious in enduring fame. Should Zeus claim you as his bride," continued the second fate, her voice a low murmur, Your progeny will rise to depose him, precisely as Zeus himself overthrew his own tyrannical father, Cronus. And if Poseidon were to marry you, added the third fate, a note of gravity in her tone, your son would seize dominion over the vast oceans and challenge Zeus for supreme suzerainty over the entire world. A profound chill, utterly unrelated to the frigid abyssal waters, permeated Thetis's being. So, their ardent desire to marry me stems from this ominous prophecy? She inquired, her voice barely a whisper. No, responded the first fate, her expression unreadable. Their current motivation to marry you is solely rooted in your unparalleled beauty. They remain entirely ignorant of this prophecy as of yet. But their enlightenment is inevitable, stated the second fate with stark finality. And it will transpire very soon. And when they finally become aware, concluded the third fate, her words carrying the weight of impending doom, neither of them will harbor any further inclination to marry you. Instead, their singular objective will be to ensure that you never bear any children whatsoever. Thetis comprehended with chilling clarity that her already precarious situation was poised to deteriorate dramatically. Being ardently pursued by two immensely powerful gods was, at best, an exasperating inconvenience. However, to be actively hunted by them would undoubtedly constitute a mortal peril of the highest order. Is there an alternative path? She implored, her voice laced with desperation. Some means to avert this grim destiny. The fates exchanged a knowing glance, a silent communication passing between them. There is indeed, the first fate articulated slowly, her voice a measured cadence. But it is a solution you will find deeply unpalatable. You could commit to a mortal husband, explained the second fate, laying out the difficult proposition. If your chosen spouse is a mere mortal, then your son, while undeniably greater than any mortal, would not possess the power to surpass the gods themselves. However, appended the third fate, her tone emphasizing a crucial caveat, this mortal must be specifically chosen and sanctioned by the gods. You are not at liberty to simply select anyone you desire. Thetis thoughtfully weighed this formidable option. To unite herself with a mortal would necessitate the profound sacrifice of her inherent immortality. In the inexorable passage of time, she would inevitably experience the frailties of age and ultimately succumb to death, a concept she had never before been compelled to contemplate. Yet such a union would also guarantee a measure of safety for both herself and her future offspring. Who then is this designated mortal? She asked, her voice tinged with resignation. Peleus, declared all three fates in chilling unison, the valiant king of the Myrmidons. Thetis had, in fact, heard of Peleus. He was renowned as a hero, a man of exceptional bravery and unwavering honor, yet undeniably and entirely human. He had previously been wed, though his wife had tragically perished during childbirth. He was, by all accounts, a commendable individual, but he was certainly not someone Thetis would have independently chosen as her life partner. When is this union to take place? She inquired, seeking further details of her predetermined fate. Soon, responded the first fate, her gaze distant. The gods, in their foresight, are already meticulously planning the elaborate wedding ceremony. Their intention is to ensure your secure marriage before they disclose the prophecy to Zeus and Poseidon, elucidated the second fate, revealing the manipulative undercurrents of the divine scheme. It promises to be an extraordinary celebration, added the third fate, a subtle hint of what might have been amusement flickering in her ancient voice. Thetis returned to her luminous coral palace to discover it already abuzz with fervent wedding preparations. The gods, having made their decision, had decreed that if she were to marry a mortal, the event must be executed with appropriate grandeur, imbued with all the divine pomp and ceremony that her exquisite beauty so deserved. The auspicious wedding was scheduled for the advent of the next full moon, to be held upon a pristine beach where the vast sea gently kissed the land. All the august gods of Olympus were slated to attend, bearing magnificent gifts and bestowing their potent blessings. It was destined to be the most breathtaking and magnificent wedding in the entire history of the world, and Thetis found herself with absolutely no recourse but to participate in her own predestined fate. She dedicated the days preceding the elaborate ceremony to a series of desperate attempts at evasion. She transformed her divine form into various elusive sea creatures, harboring the futile hope of slipping away unnoticed amidst the ocean's vastness. She assumed the swift, graceful shape of a dolphin, but Poseidon, with his unparalleled command of the seas, located her immediately. She then transformed into a ponderous sea turtle, yet Zeus, with his Olympian vantage point, effortlessly spotted her from the boundless sky. She even ventured to become a mere strand of seaweed, hoping to blend into the oceanic flora, but the relentless currents inexorably carried her directly back to her opulent palace. Finally, a profound sense of resignation settled upon her as she realized the utter impossibility of escape. The gods had irrevocably determined her destiny, and she possessed no alternative but to accept its unalterable decree. The momentous wedding day dawned under a canopy of perfect weather, a celestial gift from Zeus himself, gracing the proceedings with his benevolent favor. The chosen beach was adorned with an abundance of flowers that bloomed in hues of impossible, otherworldly brilliance, and the expansive sea lay utterly calm, its surface mirroring the sky like polished glass. All the revered gods were present, resplendent in their finest, most ceremonial robes, each bearing gifts that shimmered with an inherent divine power. Peleus, the mortal groom, awaited her at the meticulously prepared altar, his demeanor betraying a distinct nervousness, yet underscored by a quiet, resolute determination. He is a good man, Thetis realized, observing him with a newfound, albeit melancholic, clarity. He had not sought this destiny any more than she had, yet he stood prepared to fulfill his solemn duty. The ceremony unfolded with a breathtaking beauty that moved mortal onlookers to tears and elicited approving nods from the assembled deities. Yet, it was simultaneously imbued with a profound sorrow, for every participant understood that they were witnessing the ceremonial end of Thetis's cherished freedom. As the solemn vows were exchanged, Thetis's mind's eye could perceive her future stretching out before her with unblinking clarity. She would indeed bear a son who would surpass his father in every conceivable way. This son, Achilles, was destined to emerge as the preeminent hero of the legendary Trojan War, swift and exquisitely beautiful, yet tragically doomed to an early demise. She would spend her immortal existence vigilantly watching over a mortal child, burdened by the terrible foreknowledge that his extraordinary greatness would, in turn, become the very instrument of his ultimate destruction. But that, of course, is a narrative reserved for another time. Tonight, as you gently drift towards the embrace of sleep, you might contemplate the myriad smaller choices that, in their cumulative effect, profoundly shape the trajectory of our individual lives. Consider the simple decision to remain awake late into the night, engrossed in a book, or to retire early. The choice to reach out and connect with a long-lost friend, or to allow yet another day to pass in unspoken silence. The straightforward act of extending kindness to a stranger, or of withholding your compassion for yourself. These seemingly insignificant choices might appear trivial when juxtaposed against the grand, sweeping destinies of gods and heroes. Yet, they are the very choices that genuinely belong to us, the precious prerogatives that no prophecy or fate can ever confiscate. In their own quiet, unassuming way, these personal choices might, in fact, prove to be the most profoundly important of all.